Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States. And we are...
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hope everyone is doing awesome on this lovely Monday afternoon. I guess Dog Mama's joining us today. Hey, Dog Mama.
Hey.
I thought you were, you know?
I'm fine.
Oh, okay. That works. So we do have
I'm
Dog
here,
Mama
though.
tonight. So, yeah. Welcome, dear. So we have a lot to get to, so I'm going to say hello to everybody, and we're going to get right into it today. I would like to at least be done with day 5 today. We're about halfway through, so it should be doable. Day 5, and then we have day 6, and then we have day 7, which are full days. I'm going to try everything I can to be done by the end of the year. Because I think that would be, yeah. Because it's been a fun trial. It's just, it's so long, like so long. But yeah. Let's say hello and we'll get right into it. Matt may be joining us today. He has the link. I don't know if he's joining us or not. But he very well may. So. And he's always welcome. So, hey, Digger, how you doing? Jason, what's up, man? X-Comer, hello. Oh, that's wonderful. Hey, Linda. But I did go through the Constitution again. Bill of Rights, no mention of God. I'm staying out of that one. Hey, Shenny. Yes, that's exactly right. But without further ado, we're going to get right into it for today.
Sounds good.
All right. This doctor has incredible hair. Like,
Thank you.
One of these days, I hope to have hair like this.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you
Look
please
at
say
that.
your name?
Oh, amazing. That
Your
looks like a
Yes,
smile.
Dr. Bill Smock,
It
S-M-O-C-K.
does.
Formal name,
Dr.
William?
Schmock.
That's what my mom calls me.
I'm going to call you Dr. Smock. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And where are you from?
Louisville, Kentucky.
What is your current profession?
I am the police surgeon for the Louisville Metro Police Department, the medical director for the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention, and a clinical professor of emergency medicine at the University of Louisville.
I'm going to unpack that in just a moment, but I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Exhibit 145.
So you're a nerd.
Take a moment and look through that document. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And what is it?
One-
This is my
One day.
resume or curriculum vitae.
One
And what is
day,
the date on the top of it?
I will have a
April
comb over like that.
2021.
So that's current as of April 2021.
That is correct.
How many pages is it?
It's important to have aspirations and
Double-sided?
goals.
Yes, ma'am.
It is very important.
Your Honor, permission to publish to the jury? Place the first page of State's Exhibit 145 on the overhead. And I want to talk a little bit first about your educational background. Can you give the jury a history of your schooling, etc.?
Yes, ma'am. I went to college at a small college called Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Graduated in 1981. Then obtained a master's degree in anatomy from the University of Louisville School of Medicine. Then entered medical school in 1986 and graduated in 1990. I then completed a residency in emergency medicine at the University of Louisville School of Medicine. And then completed a one-year fellowship in clinical forensic medicine with Kentucky Medical Examiner's Office.
When did you lose your hair?
Which the
That's a good question.
residency
Yes.
fellowship.
We'll start there.
Residency is training for doctors.
If I were on that
The
jury,
training
I
in
would
emergency medicine
100%
was
ask
3
that.
years. It was at what's called a level 1 trauma
Yeah.
center, which means it's a highest level of trauma care that can be provided anywhere in the country. It's where the doctors train. That's where medical students train. So we, at our level 1 trauma center, we get 100, 120 patients a day, gunshot, stabs, beatings, strangulations. When you're injured, you go to a trauma center, hopefully that high level. So I did that for 3 years, taking care of thousands of patients every year. Then after graduating, then completed a fellowship, which is a 1-year program of additional training with the Kentucky Medical Examiner's Office. What that means is being trained by forensic pathologists, attending autopsies every day, and applying that science of forensic medicine to dead people, but principally to living patients. So in Louisville, you don't have to die to see a forensic doctor. So if you're stabbed, beaten, strangled, whatever, gunshot wound, the police can actually request that a forensic doctor or nurse come to the emergency department or the intensive care unit and do what we call a living forensic autopsy. Look at your injuries just like a pathologist does, but we don't get into you're still alive.
And so you have your medical degree, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you are a medical doctor.
Yes, ma'am.
And as part of your training and experience in emergency room medicine, did you become and pass your board certification examinations in that?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what years were those?
In 1994 and then 2004.
Now, you indicated that you completed your fellowship at the Kentucky Medical Examiner's Office. What is a medical examiner's office in Kentucky?
In Kentucky, that's where forensic autopsies are performed. We have forensic pathologists on staff. We have forensic pathology residents that are also part of that training program. So when a coroner in Kentucky says we would like an autopsy on someone who died for whatever reason, then they go to the medical examiner, and that's where the autopsy is performed.
And you completed a 1-year fellowship there.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What is clinical forensic medicine?
Clinical forensic medicine is taking that same forensic pathology science, but applying it to, most of the time, to that living patient. So again, the patient who gets shot, stabbed, beaten, that comes to our trauma center to do that living forensic autopsy. Same science, same principles of forensic medicine, but applying it to the
And I was
living
agreeing with
most of the
Jason
time. Sometimes we
J.
do it on deceased where we're trying to figure out
Just
who was
cut
the
it
driver,
off.
who was the passenger in a car.
That's
But
true.
Most of the time it's for living patients.
And you also indicated that you've received a training from forensic pathologists. What are forensic pathologists?
Forensic pathologists are the doctors
Does
that
kind of get me
perform
going
autopsies.
though, having hair like that.
Have you been trained by forensic pathologists?
Yes, ma'am. Since
Oh,
1994 was when I first began receiving training from forensic
Oh,
pathologists.
we're too
the
early.
analysis
We're
of
too
images.
early in. Sorry.
describe that
My
for me?
bad.
Yes,
Fuck it.
Beginning in 1984 was when I did my master's degree in anatomy. At that time, I became an investigator for the medical examiner's office. and the Sept County
1984.
Coroner's office. And that would include going to scenes to document
Look.
what were the conditions at that scene where that individual died, photographing the injuries, the situation, then going the next day to the autopsy, documenting the injuries that we found at autopsy, and then going back to the scene and reconstructing what happened. Usually it was involved motor vehicle trauma, but there were other cases of other types of trauma where I would, as part of the investigation, part of the master's degree, was go to every fatal motor vehicle collision that occurred in Jefferson County during an 18-month period.
Wow.
And then you indicated that you've worked with pathologists ever since then.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And with what frequency?
From 1991 through 97, I was an assistant medical examiner at the Kentucky Medical Examiner's Office. Continue to work with pathologists at the Kentucky Medical Examiner's Office, actually to the current time, but also work with forensic pathologists at other agencies around the country. Denver Medical Examiner's Office, trained them. San Diego Medical Examiner's Office, trained forensic pathologists in other countries, including Scotland, England, Colombia and South America, Australia.
So you've participated in forensic autopsies then?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know how many or approximately?
No, thousands.
And have you been trained to actually perform an autopsy?
Yes, ma'am. I was trained to be what's called the diener, some people call it an autopsy assistant. That means that I was the one who would actually make the incision.
Trained to be a
on the
what?
body, open it up, cut the organs out, hand them to the forensic pathologist for them to do additional dissection, put the organs back in, sew the body up, and get it ready to go to the funeral home.
And you indicated that you've also trained internationally and specifically mentioned Scotland. What was that focus of that training and when was that?
The first training was during medical school. In the United States, there was no clinical forensic medicine training program anywhere in the United States at that time. So I met a forensic pathologist by the name of Tony Bastudel, who worked in Scotland with New Scotland Yard. So I spent 2 months in Scotland doing daily autopsies, going to crime scenes, doing forensic investigations with the forensic pathologist there. So that was in 1989 during medical school. But I've continued to go back and actually train physicians in England and in Scotland in forensics.
And can you review again your current positions? And in your current positions, do you routinely go to death and crime scenes?
Yes, ma'am. As the police surgeon, which is a unique term or position
Matt.
in Louisville.
Hey, what's up, Matt?
Doctor for the SWAT team.
How you
What's
doing,
up?
buddy?
Schmock's in the box, huh?
Yeah, is his hair really that gorgeous in real life?
It's I wanted to enter it into evidence, whatever the thing's on his head. He's
That
got
was
quite a resume, doesn't he?
Yeah. Does he end up
Thousands.
being a decent guy or kind of
No,
shit like the rest of them?
He lied, man. I mean, he lied.
Okay.
He lied. This was his 10th trial that year. It was August, so he had testified at that trial we were talking about before, the guy with the Floyd guy, right?
Uh-huh.
So he's a professional witness.
Oh, okay.
And what he's his I don't know how far you're into it, but he says he's a cop surgeon, a police surgeon. I don't know if I never went into his credentials. I do know this though. He claims he's the head of an institute, and the name of the institute is this crazy long strangulation prevention. I don't think he's come. Maybe he has. Maybe he's already mentioned it. But he's the only member of the institute.
Okay.
Wait till Diane gets a hold of him. He hawks T-shirts on. I mean, why would you call it an institute if there's one person, right? I mean, it's just,
right.
And he goes into like he's a crime scene. This guy's a crime scene investigator, is what he is. He puts together like car accidents. He'll figure out what happened, but he also does all these side things. Yeah, this guy's obviously a jack of all trades, but what he isn't is he's not a forensic pathologist. I know that, and he says I think he's talking about he's doing autopsies. He was an autopsies assistant. But does he? I mean, you'd have to go over his credentials and decide for yourself. I can't see why anybody would think that this guy knows more than my expert, who's a forensic anthropologist. So a board certified forensic anthropologist. I don't know if you know what it takes to become board certified at anything, but there's a board of similar people with similar backgrounds, right? That make sure that you're up on all the this and that. This guy's not. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like they got a lot of quote impressive people, but not people that were relevant to their field in any way, shape, or form.
No,
so.
and I don't think it really matters because if you, in the long run, you're just trying to trick a jury really quick, who's got a day to listen to this guy. Then what are you going to do? I mean, your defense attorney has a minute to get up there and kind of like, okay, I guess you're this. Diane does a really good job of making this guy look like a dummy, but I can't imagine that everybody would get, so. He's basically just up there throwing. He spends more time on his resume than he does anything else, and then he comes across. I'll point it out. He said there's a couple really telling things that he screws up on. That unless you're looking for it, you're not going to be able to see it. Unless I'm here to tell you that's where he screwed up. There's just too much information for a jury to figure all this out so quickly. It's just they're putting too much on the jury. But
yeah,
so
they're just trying to
throw his credentials out there, and he says, hey, listen, this was not, he says, when she asks him at the end of all this BS, what makes you think this is a murder? And he says, well, I looked at the scene, and then he goes on to some of the, and just that one part, he's like, I looked at the scene. Well, what about the scene? He doesn't say anything about the scene, but he's a crime scene investigator. This is what he does, but he doesn't say anything about the scene that tells you it was staged. So it's just kind of like they're just saying things. I don't know if you've ever been a part of a trial before, but I can't believe that they allow things like this to happen to people. I really can't, because
I've been a juror on a trial.
If you spent 6 months on that what you went through those few days, you probably would have had a way better understanding of what was going on. You probably would have found out, wow, this is a scam. It's just a scam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not gonna. There's no way a jury, just a regular guy is gonna get on a jury and be able to understand what these people are talking about in a day. It's just impossible. There's no way you're gonna be able to figure it out. I don't care. You can spend all the time you want in deliberations. It's not gonna happen. But that's not what they're looking for you to really do, is to understand anything. It's a show. It's literally a show.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just drop this here for some break or something. Thank you for the super, Comer. Google AI, moon pictures fake, Chinese pictures real, in case you saw that. No, I haven't seen that, but I will certainly look into it backstage here and give you my thoughts. But thanks for the super, buddy. Shit, that's crazy. I have to see what the difference between the two, but
Oh, he's talking AI stuff.
supposedly what he's saying is that the U.S. moon pictures are fake. So, it's just partially true.
I don't doubt it. Is this not crazy? What's going on right now? Rogan just had a guy on, not to like go to another subject. Joe Rogan, I've been watching since he came out. He had a guy on from the government that was talking all about that they've known about UFOs for forever.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I'm certain of that.
I
don't want to.
I really enjoyed your new. You have a news deal, right? You had on the other day.
Yeah, Thursdays I do news. So
Thursdays, seriously, I caught the last one, dude. You're hilarious. Yeah, the world is definitely coming to an end. We're definitely on the same. The world as we know it anyway is coming to an end.
Yeah, it's getting fucky for sure.
Weird.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that behind the scenes here and let you know, Comer. Comer pays me to distract the shit out of me. That's his goal in life, is to distract me. No matter what the show is. Yeah. He kind of gets off on it, and I appreciate the hell out of it. So yeah, but that's I'll definitely be looking at it, you know that. So, but all right, let's keep moving with this. So
it's the doctor that advises the police chief on healthcare policies, but most of the time is spent doing the forensic consultations with detectives, homicide detectives, domestic violence detectives, crimes against children detectives, traffic officers, to help them figure out what happened, which many times includes being called to the scene of what happened to help them analyze what do we see at the scene, what evidence needs to be collected, what's the best way to collect that and preserve that evidence. And then ultimately, once we send that information to the crime lab, then to assist the detectives in how we interpret the evidence that we saw and then what the other evidence was the crime lab analyzed.
How many crime or death scenes have you been to?
More than 1,000. I don't
1,000.
anymore.
Is it fair to say, do you train law enforcement in how to evaluate and collect evidence at scenes?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And have you created a educational course on how to evaluate staged crime scenes?
Yes, ma'am. I train officers from the Louisville Metro Police Department at our police academy. I've also trained the FBI agents recently, just out in Wyoming. I've trained.
He's an
I've
expert.
created a new course
crime
in
scene.
staged. It's called Getting Away with Murder: The Challenges of Staged Crime Scenes.
Thousands.
That's a course that will be offered for the first time in October of this year.
wow.
Where we're having law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, defense attorneys all come to this first course of its kind that we've created in the United States, of taking 4 cases of actual staged crime scenes and having those individuals work through them. How do they work through the scene? We actually, what's going to be great is we have mannequins. We made real mannequins.
It's all bullshit.
Dr. Scott, can I focus you on your experience?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you'd asked about.
Thrilling, but I want to get through your experience and get to this case if we can.
I'm sorry. So yes, I trained people on how to evaluate crime scenes. If that was your question, I'm sorry.
Stage crime
And have you
scenes,
trained local
not
authorities
just
within the
crime
United
scenes,
States?
staged
Yes, ma'am, I
crime
do.
scenes.
And that is important
Right.
to recognize staged crime scenes.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you previously been recognized as an expert on staged crime scenes in a homicide trial?
Yes, ma'am.
And most recently, when was that?
I was within the last year. I've had several. The last one was just 2 weeks ago.
And now you talked about the police surgeon, the clinical professor for emergency medicine. What does that mean?
In the at the University of Louisville, they have doctors that are full-time, and I was full-time through 2011 in our trauma center. After I went full-time with the police department in 2011, I remained what's called a clinical professor, and these are professors that donate their time to train medical students and residents. So medical students and residents will come and do rotations with me at the police department. They come and we do clinical forensic medicine. We do literature reviews. We analyze cases. We go to crime scenes. I put them with the SWAT team so they can get trained in tactical medicine. So the doctors and medical students will come and rotate with me. Sometimes for a month. I have 2 current medical students who have been with me for the last 2 years. So it's.
And that's a position you occupy today still.
That is correct.
How long have you been a clinical professor of emergency medicine?
Since 2011.
And then can you tell the jury, I'm going to point to State's Exhibit 145, the medical director for Alliance for Hope International Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention. Can you explain what is the Alliance for Hope
That's
International
his
Training
institute.
on
They just
Strangulation
mentioned
Prevention?
it.
Yes, ma'am. It's not full.
Okay.
The Training Institute is a partially Department of Justice funded nonprofit that provides training to people around the world, usually doctors, nurses, police officers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, in how to evaluate cases of fatal and non-fatal strangulation. This is everything from
Give me a
victim
break.
through the investigation, through the documentation of the
Give
injuries,
me
the
a
interpretation of the,
Are you kidding
and then
me?
on the criminal side of the police and the prosecutors, what evidence is there or isn't there to take this case forward?
And how long have you?
Yeah,
been the
how you
medical
fuck
director for that
someone? That's
institute?
what he does.
Since 2019.
Right.
Were you a part of that institute prior to that?
Yes, ma'am. Joined the institute in 2011 and was chairman of several of their medical subcommittees. But in 2019, they asked me to become their medical director.
As a police surgeon in the state of Kentucky, are you a sworn law enforcement officer?
Actually, in the state of Indiana, I am.
And how long have
You're
you
on
been a
the
sworn law
state of
enforcement officer?
Indiana.
Since 1997.
I want to take you back a little bit to, again, your
He's
time
a
as an
cop.
emergency physician at the University
Yeah.
of Louisville Trauma Center. And you indicated that was a level 1 trauma center.
Yes, ma'am.
And how many patients would you see there while you were an emergency physician?
Oh, probably in my career, more than 100,000. We get probably 60 patients per 12-hour shift. And if you figure minimum 12 shifts a month for
How the
12 months
hell?
for 20 plus years, that's tens of thousands of patients
And does that include patients with facial trauma?
every day. Yes, ma'am.
Does that include patients with neck trauma?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that capacity, have you also authored death certificates?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you the first physician in the United States to complete a postgraduate fellowships in clinical forensic medicine?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And can you explain when that was and what that means?
Yes, ma'am. Remember, I said that in the United States, there were no programs to train doctors in clinical forensic medicine, which is why I went to Scotland to learn how they do it in the countries where they have a clinical forensic physician in most major cities. So I went there, and that was part of the training to what is the curriculum that a clinical forensic physician needs to have. So I then got that. I brought that back to the University of Louisville and to the Kentucky Medical Examiner's Office. And it was because of that training and the information that that first fellowship
Here
was
today,
created in
John
the United
Navarro.
States to train
Yes,
doctors
sir.
in the science of forensic medicine, but applied to living patients.
And what is forensic medicine?
Forensic medicine basically means legal medicine. It's the type of medicine where there will be a legal question, cause or manner of death, cause or manner of particular injuries. How do you interpret information? Could be a toxicologic information. Could be analysis of the way a bone is broken. Could be analysis of a crime scene. It's what we call legal medicine.
And as part of your, well, how long have you been at this, Dr. Smock? Been a emergency room physician,
Since 1990.
a clinical professor in forensic medicine.
A professor since 1994. After I finished the fellowship, I then joined the faculty as an assistant, then associate, then full professor.
And so can you do the math for me because it's late? How many years have you been doing this?
I've been going to the crime scene since 1984, so that's 38 years.
And how many years have you been a police surgeon?
Since 1993.
Wow.
All right, so 30 plus years of experience.
Yes, ma'am.
And in your 30 plus years of experience, do you read literature?
Every week.
And that literature is relevant to your role
Another
as a
academic, essentially,
police surgeon?
Yes, ma'am.
just like
As
the
someone
previous
who,
one.
Attends and
Huge
researches
ego.
aids law enforcement
Yep.
and the
Look at
analysis of staged scenes.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, have you yourself written and edited any textbooks?
My thing
on,
is,
clinical
you know,
forensic medicine?
you get
Yes,
all
ma'am,
these
I have.
people
How
that
many?
testify and do those kind of stuff.
4
How does
books,
that not bite you in the
one book
ass
published
at
in
some
London,
point?
one in the United States,
How
first
does
and
it
second
not-
edition, and then most recently.
How does your
a workbook
credibility not
on,
come into question
strangulation.
at some point
It's
when you do
it's-
shady
it's-
shit?
It's a club, dude, and we're not in it.
Yeah.
Not going to admit them.
Literally a
What are
club.
these? This one's really heavy.
Yep.
Sorry.
This is a book called Forensic Medicine.
This guy's
Clinical
gonna
and
keep
Pathologic
doing what he's doing because
Aspects.
he's playing ball.
That's Tony Basuto was my mentor
Right.
over in Scotland.
Right.
So this
As long
is
as you don't rock the boat, you
forensic
stay there.
pathologists and for police surgeons.
Outside of court.
And you're contributing author to that book,
Actually, editor.
editor.
Look at this book this guy
So
wrote.
you're editing a book that trains forensic pathologists and police surgeons.
Yes, ma'am.
And the
Look
other
at that fucking
The other
thing.
is
Are
called
you
Forensic
kidding me?
Emergency Medicine. This is the second edition.
Oh my
This was a
god.
book written for emergency
He is an
physicians in the
academic.
United States on how to evaluate trauma patients from a forensic standpoint. So patients that would come into the ER.
Just
stabbed,
make him
strangled,
hand over his
shot, whatever.
comb. He
This
can
gives that emergency physician, information on how to evaluate it, just like we did for forensic pathologists, but this is for ER doctors.
And you are contributing what to that?
Editor as well.
Now, Dr. Spock, have you received any awards during your career?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
And can you summarize some of those for the jury, please?
But he's an
Certainly have,
editor, though.
Awards from the University of Louisville for public service, from my college.
Yeah, he's an editor in a
public service,
college
from
textbook, so
forensic nursing
he
organizations.
made some
from
asshole write it,
prosecutor
and he just
organizations,
wrote
from
his
police
name on it.
organizations,
Exactly.
From locally from my peers. They have what's called Top Doc
For
Awards.
credibility.
Had that for several years too.
One moment, please. In addition to the books that you've authored, have you also contributed or written articles?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Now I'm going to just put one of the pages from State's Exhibit 145 on, page 17. And if you can, let's just start down here.
Yes,
Just
ma'am.
list some of them off, please.
Yes, ma'am. This is most recent. This is on gunshot wounds for surgeons. There's one on podoconiosis, which is a fancy term. I take medical students to Africa. So my medical students on our medical missions come back and write papers. I've got one on tasers, one on guns, gun safety.
And then the list continues, does it not?
Yeah, I
Of
think
course,
there's
he's
probably
an
40,
academic.
chapters. and
Yeah, it makes
articles
sense.
in there.
Fair to say that's just a snapshot of your experience.
Takes Ivy League kids to Africa. Cute.
He says he's a crime
Are
scene.
you able to give the jury and the court an understanding of how
Expert,
many
but he
articles
never-
or literature you've reviewed regarding clinical forensic medicine?
Hundreds.
No, he seems
never
just like the
mentioned
last
When you
expert.
edit textbooks.
what it was about my case
You have
that
to be very familiar with the literature.
made him think it was
So
stage.
that if
Ever.
something is written, you need to make sure that it is
Huh.
accurate.
He just tells you
because your name's going
he's
on.
an expert in stage crime,
And,
and
the
then
same
he
question
doesn't
for
give you
emergency
any
medicine.
example why
Yes, ma'am.
my
is
case was
How
any
many
stage
articles or
crime
literature do you?
that
you
there
must
wasn't
have
anything
reviewed?
staged.
Oh, no,
You have to
because he
listen
didn't
to
have
it,
anything.
But have,
and he
have
doesn't
been
tell you.
editing, way
Yeah.
more than that.
Do you consider that to be important in your career?
You just
Absolutely,
open
it's
the
critical.
jury makes the connection. Oh, he's a stage crime guy, and
What the
he's
science and
saying
medicine says.
He-
That's-
he's
He doesn't-
speaking on it. So of
You have to
course,
He
you
says
know.
that the injuries
I want to turn now to a
Emily
little bit about
Knapp
your qualifications regarding the area
were
of
indicative of a
strangulation.
strangulation,
Have
but he
received
doesn't
training
show
yourself
you
on
why.
non-fatal and fatal
He just
strangulation?
says it.
Yes,
Huh.
ma'am.
And what training is that?
The fatal started with the medical examiner's office, looking at people who've been fatally strangled, looking at fatal hangings. In the emergency department, we see people who have been strangled because that's where they come for care. We've seen people
He's not
who
giving
This
those
asshole isn't
fatal
cheap.
strangulations
hung but didn't
autopsies.
die.
He just
and so
happens
they will
to be
come
a
to the
doctor
emergency
that's
department.
at the emergency
I've
room.
been evaluating
Right.
When these cases come in, I
fatal and
guess
non-fatal
there's
strangulation again for more than
thousands of
38 years.
strangulations every
Yeah.
year, or
Wow.
whatever this guy's talking about.
That's in addition to
Huh.
your training to be an emergency room physician and in forensic medicine.
Yes, although there's clearly overlap because when you're strangled and you survive, you're going to come to the ER. You're going to come see an ER doctor.
And
So
he only
there's the
looks
forensic
at
portion and the concepts,
live
and there's also
victims,
taking care of those
not
living
dead
patients that come in to see you for care and treatment.
And in your experience for the last 38 years, how many injuries or necks of strangled patients have you examined?
Thousands?
And this
Thousands.
includes observing injuries,
Yes, ma'am.
both internal and external,
Yes, ma'am.
and both the living and the dead.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you assisted in the autopsies of fatal strangulation victims?
Yes, ma'am.
And how many fatal strangulation autopsies have you attended in your career?
Oh, I don't know. Hundreds?
And do you continue to consult on those fatal strangulation autopsies?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Now, as your time as an emergency room physician, do you have experience treating victims of assault and strangulation?
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately how many?
Thousands?
thousands.
And he's not
In the last
so
year, how many
disingenuous
trainings
because he's
have-
not there
do
actually
you
doing
teach now
anything.
on or train others in strangulation?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And
He
how long have you been
doesn't
doing
tell
that?
you why.
I've been teaching since
He doesn't show
before
you
medical
any,
school.
And then
literally
with
nothing.
regards to strangulation, same.
Teaching since
But it's real
members
impressive
of
what
the
you're
residents
hearing right now.
since
You
the early
know,
90s.
trying to
Right.
figure out
And
this
how many
guy's
trainings
real.
in the past year have you been a part of or conducted where you were teaching?
For my
or consulting?
teaching, averages about 2 trainings per month somewhere in the country. A lot of us in virtual, but now we're getting back to in person.
And have you ever taught internationally on the subject of fatal and non-fatal strangulation?
Yes, ma'am.
How many times in your career do you think you have provided these trainings and estimate?
Over 100 trainings.
And do you train medical students yourself
Yes, ma'am, I do.
and attending physicians?
Yes, ma'am.
Where at?
Oh, all over the country. I train, I do what's called grand rounds. That's where at a hospital, a doctor will come in and we'll get the doctors together or the residents and medical students and then give them, usually it's an hour, sometimes it's 2 if we can squeeze out 2 of how to evaluate victims that have been strangled.
And have you been qualified and recognized as an expert before in forensic medicine
Yes, ma'am, I have.
in the United States?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you been qualified and recognized as an expert before in strangulation
Yes, ma'am.
in the United States?
Yes, ma'am.
And approximately how many times,
Oh, more than 100.
including here in Delaware County?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you edited and reviewed textbooks on the evaluation of strangulation victims?
Yes, ma'am.
How many?
4 textbooks.
Those are the ones we already talked about.
Yes, ma'am.
And have you conducted research and literature reviews into the effects and medical consequences of strangulation on humans?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've actually seen that as an emergency room physician
Yes, ma'am.
and as a police surgeon
Yes, ma'am.
and as a medical director for the Alliance Hope Institute.
Yes, ma'am.
And have you yourself authored a specific protocol on how to medically evaluate victims of strangulation?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Has that protocol been adopted by any physicians, hospital, medical professionals that you know?
Yes, all over the country, including here in Ohio.
In your past experience, have you been called upon by state and federal prosecutors to assist in the investigation and prosecution of felony strangulation cases?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Are you currently on contract with anyone
Yes,
to
ma'am, I
provide? Who?
Under with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, Department of Defense, to assist them in their evaluations, and then most recently NCIS.
What is NCIS? That to me is a television show.
Yes, Naval Criminal Intelligence Service.
And have you testified before in multiple state and federal courts as an expert in the consequences and medical effects of strangulation?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you been recognized as an expert in that area in state and federal courts?
Yes, ma'am.
How many times?
No, I don't keep track, but it's more than 100.
And you've reviewed and consulted on cases involving strangulation for the FBI?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you ever, let's change gears a little bit though, have you ever consulted with someone accused of strangulation?
Yes, ma'am.
And who engages your services then?
Those would be defense attorneys, criminal defense attorneys will have brought me cases involving
Of course they would.
strangulation.
And have you ever testified on the behalf of someone accused of a crime before?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
And I want to go back to just your experience again regarding police surgeon and in the emergency room. Have you ever conducted suspect exams?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is a suspect exam?
A suspect exam is when a detective has a crime and they want not only an exam on the victim of the crime, but also on the person allegedly who inflicted a particular injury, stabbing, gunshot wound, strangulation, beating, whatever. To do that same sort of evaluation, does the suspect have any injuries that would be consistent or inconsistent with a history that they gave?
One moment, please, Your Honor. Tender Dr. Smock as an expert in forensic medicine and an expert in emergency room medicine, in crime scene analysis and strangulation.
Just let him be an expert. Who cares? We had to go through all that. So what? Look at Diane. She's laughing already.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Diane Nashi on behalf of Matt Moore. I know you were asked about your training, but you are not a pathologist.
That is correct. I'm not.
You are not an anthropologist.
That is correct. I'm not.
You are not a board certified forensic pathologist by
That-
extension.
That is correct.
With respect to what a police surgeon is, I know you've been asked this question a number of times. You would agree with me that your answer as to what a police surgeon is that you're a physician trained in forensic medicine to assist detectives in cases involving living victims, living patients. Is that right?
That is one portion of my duties as a police surgeon. That is correct. One
And in
portion.
the cases where you worked with non-living individuals, you were trying, for example, to determine, like in a car accident, who was the driver, who was the passenger in a motor vehicle collision, where both occupants were ejected, one clearly driving. Do you remember? Does that sound about right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because your work is in living victims.
My work is with living, but it's also with decedents as well.
And in that example that I just talked about, with respect to crime, you are not a crime scene reconstruction expert, correct?
There are portions of crime scenes that I reconstruct. So gunshot wounds, car wrecks. So
just say
yes, there's a
no,
portion
because
of
it's no.
what I do that does reconstruct what happened at a crime scene.
I'm showing you what's been marked as defendant's exhibit HH, and these questions are with respect to your qualifications. Do you recognize this page generally?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
You would agree with me that you go onto the Louisville Metro Police Department and this is the page that comes up?
I don't know if it's on the website or not.
Okay, and where do you recognize it from?
I've seen it before. It's a document that's been out there.
Okay, and this is you, right?
It
And
is.
that's you in a uniform, because I think I heard you say you were a physician in blue.
No, never said that, but clearly I'm wearing a blue uniform.
I'm just curious with respect to your qualifications on this. Where, if anywhere, does it say that you're a crime scene reconstruction?
Of course.
expert?
Yeah, he is a cop.
It does not state that specifically. What it states is internationally recognized forensic expert and trained nurses, physicians, law enforcement officers, attorneys in multiple fields, including officer-involved shootings, strangulation, gunshot wound, injury mechanisms, and motor vehicle trauma.
No, I understand that, but you're being tendered. One of the things I wanted to board dear on is as an expert in crime scene analysis. And you would agree with me that there isn't any indication of your expertise in crime scene analysis.
On that document, that is correct.
Furthermore, just want to talk about in terms of your qualifications right here. Your current employer is the Louisville Metro Police Department. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the Institute of Clinical Forensic Medicine and Nursing. That's a company that you started in Indiana, is it not?
That is correct.
And despite it saying institute, it's just a body of one, right? It's just you.
It is me with part-time forensic nurses.
And that company is called Clinical Medicine and Nursing. It is not any crime scene analysis or reconstruction as that entity is named. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, the name is the Institute of Clinical Forensic Medicine and Nursing.
Your Honor, I would object to any tendering of this expert in crime scene analysis. Thank you, Your Honor.
Dr. Smock.
I have to
That's not
agree
what we
with
talked
the
about
lawyer.
being a Police surgeon, but that's actually only one of the jobs you've ever had, right?
That is correct.
And that's one job where you actually analyzed crime scenes,
That is correct.
right? And so in your role as a police surgeon, how often do you go to crime scenes?
Could be several times a week. It depends on when I get called.
And
Several
so in
times
that
a
role,
week.
how many crime scenes have you evaluated?
In between all the
Hundreds, if not
strangulations
thousands.
at the
How many have you attended?
hospital.
Again, hundreds. of
Right.
thousands.
And again, you actually train
Guy
and
gets
help
around,
law
man.
enforcement to look at the evidence at a crime scene,
Yes, ma'am.
to decide. you know,
Of course,
what
because
is
again,
evidence,
he's not
what is
doing
evidence,
anything. He
Yes,
just
ma'am. How
shows
is it
up
going to
and puts
apply?
his name on it
all
for
right.
credibility.
And so being a police
You
surgeon
have to
in that
look
one
up his
piece of
website.
document-
Okay.
The Alliance for Hope International.
Just hold it up.
Okay.
Defendants Exhibit
Training
18. I mean, this
Institute
is taken
on
off a website,
Strangulation
right?
Prevention.
That is correct.
Did you write your 38 years of experience on this website piece of paper?
No, ma'am.
All right.
Pick yourself up a T-shirt.
Now, in
Leave a
addition to being
donation.
a police surgeon, you're also an emergency room physician.
Yes,
He
ma'am.
takes donations.
And you
man.
have seen individuals
Wow.
report to you with trauma,
Yes, ma'am.
including facial trauma, neck trauma.
Your Honor, my objection, just for clarification, is with respect to any tendering that's to crime scene.
Right, this is,
I'm getting there.
okay, go there if you will.
All right. Yes.
It's a fucking
correct.
racket.
And that's the trauma is what?
Trauma is some force being applied to a human body.
And that can be the result of an accident.
Yes, ma'am.
That could be the result of an intentional act,
Yes, ma'am.
a crime.
Yes, ma'am.
And so in your role as an emergency room physician, those
Wow.
observations you make about trauma, do you use those as you evaluate crime scenes?
Absolutely, I do, because the victim, the patient comes in, is a living crime scene. We collect evidence on victims who come in. So so the victim is a crime scene as well as that, what we think of as that physical crime scene.
And the injuries speak to you regarding what occurred at a scene.
Yes, ma'am.
And you have observed how many of those in your role as an emergency room physician?
No, 100,000?
Now, defense counsel was, in addition to being a police surgeon, the emergency room physician, you also have your own institute that you started with forensic nurses.
Yes, ma'am.
And does that have anything to do with crime scene analysis?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
And explain that to the jury, please.
When a prosecutor's office, a police officer, or police department, or a federal agency comes to me with a case, part of what they're asking me to do is to evaluate whatever evidence is there, including the analysis of the evidence and the crime scene itself. Is the crime scene and the evidence consistent or inconsistent with a particular history that has been given?
And then you indicated again also that you are the medical director for the Alliance of Hope Institute on Strangulation Prevention. Does that have anything to do with
She
crime scene
can't say
analysis?
it.
Yes, ma'am, it does.
And can you explain that to the jury? please?
Yes, ma'am. As part of the courses that we give, we teach individuals, whoever comes to the training, police,
Ah, good, let's
prosecutors,
set up a little
nurses,
course
doctors,
for people.
about evidence collection, evidence interpretation, and how that, and then evidence analysis. What does that
Hope
evidence
they
mean?
have in
So it's-
Vegas.
we actually have, as part of that 4-day training, we actually have a crime scene, a staged crime scene in a hotel room.
Oh,
And
these
we ask the
stages
students to
one
go
for
in and analyze the evidence that's there, collect evidence, photograph the evidence, and then interpret
Give
the evidence.
me
So
a
crime scene
fucking-
evaluation is part of what I do, and it's part of what the Institute does, and it's part of what I teach.
And I'm going to please state page 80 of your curriculum vitae, which by the way, this is a complete version of your experience, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Not that piece of paper with 3 paragraphs on it.
That is correct.
Page 80. Let's scoop that up. And I want recognized areas of expertise, state and federal courts. What does that mean?
That means that the judges in those courts have recognized me based upon my education, experience, or training to be qualified to render opinions in those subject areas.
All right, just go ahead and read it down the line, please.
Emergency medicine, forensic medicine, penetrating trauma, which means knife,
Oh,
gunshot
damn
wounds,
well.
entrance versus
That
exit,
doesn't mean
range of
that
fire,
you're good for this one.
path, trajectory, shooting reconstruction.
'Cause you've done it
versus
before.
self-inflicted injuries, officer-involved shootings, blunt force trauma, pattern injury recognition, inflicted versus accidental injuries, motor vehicle trauma, injury mechanisms, occupant kinematics, which means how do people move in cars, accident investigation, determination of occupant role, driver or passenger, restraint effectiveness, airbag-induced injuries, strangulation, suffocation, asphyxia, torture-related injuries, elder abuse and neglect, child maltreatment, forensic toxicology, wound injury reconstruction, stage altered crime scenes, and sexual assault.
So you have been declared an expert before, or recognized as an expert in the area of staged and altered crime scenes.
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Uh-oh.
Is that synonymous with crime scene analysis?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And then finally,
No, it's
you
not.
actually teach on the subject of staged or altered crime scenes.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And who do you teach?
I trained at
When have you
the Old
ever
Western Police Academy,
asserted
the
that
police
this
officers
is
and
a
detectives.
stage or
We
altered
most
crime
recently
scene?
trained FBI agents, federal prosecutors.
I haven't heard it.
I'm training Department of Defense, the Judge Advocate Generals, the JAG Corps for the Department of Defense, doctors, nurses. It's part of what I'm training somewhere in the country twice a month.
Got no soul.
So if someone
None.
wants to consult with an expert regarding staged crime scenes, they come to you.
Objection, Your Honor.
Your Honor, it's just testified that everybody.
I'll sustain you.
Your Honor, then at this time, in addition to the other qualifications and expertise, we would tender this witness as an expert in crime scene analysis, forensic medicine, emergency medicine, and strangulation.
Court will permit you to proceed forward accordingly.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Smock, you were invited here today by the state of Ohio, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And to render an opinion involving the remains of Emily Noble.
That's correct.
Are you being compensated for your time here today?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And now you've actually been involved in this case since May of 2021, or prior to that even.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, let me try. When did you become involved in this case? You tell the jury.
I believe it was in the end of 2020.
Well, hold on a second. We'll get to your report.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't
Is there
you
something
lead
that
them a
would
little
refresh
bit
your
more,
recollection
Vic?
at this point?
No, I don't have any dates on the report other than when the report was written.
All right, we'll get there then.
Okay.
So you were involved in the remains of Emily Noble prior to the date you authored your report.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 146. I think that might be.
148.
Thank you. Your Honor, can we put something on the record at sidebar real briefly, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, they probably shouldn't have tendered them, but unfortunately, pretty much experts always get tendered as experts, even if they're not.
Right.
Which is a shitty way of doing things, but
I don't think that he's a bone expert.
I don't think he's an expert in any of what he's testifying to.
Right.
Looks like
Well,
they're trying to
just-
stretch their theory of the case based on what
Correct.
he's an expert in.
He's their whole case.
Yeah.
That's it. And as far as in a stage crime scene, he says it was staged, but he doesn't tell you why it was staged or how he knows it was staged. You know.
Wow.
Isn't that the point, though?
What he's there for, you'd think.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you would think that he'd be like, hey, this is why I know it's staged because of the type of knot or the way she was lying or how she was, the method in which just something, nothing.
Right.
Something.
Are you familiar with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell
This
us
is
why.
the report that I authored.
This
And,
didn't work. All
the
this
main
didn't work.
matter of
So.
Emily Noble.
That's correct.
And what did you? Is it a fair and accurate copy of your report, sir?
It is.
All right. And what did you review?
Ghost Street says, please explain the witness comb over.
I reviewed.
I
the
think it's
Montgomery County
sexy,
autopsy
and I
report
said
of
that
Emily
to
Noble.
start.
Reviewed
So,
the autopsy photographs of Emily Noble. Reviewed
Hard
color
pass.
photographs of the USB cord. Reviewed reports of the Westerville Police Department and Ohio Attorney General's Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Reviewed the forensic autopsy or anthropology report. Reviewed an addendum to the forensic anthropology report. Reviewed color photographs taken by the Westerville Police Department and VCI. Reviewed color photographs of Emily Noble taken on May 24th, 2020. Reviewed dental x-rays of Emily Noble and reviewed the 3D scan of the scene.
And what was your purpose in conducting that review and offering this opinion?
Purpose was to look at what evidence we had, to look at the scene, look at the injuries, look at the injury mechanisms,
we had.
understand how the type of injuries that Emily had occurred, when do they occur, when don't they occur, look at the ligature, look at all the evidence surrounding her death, body position, ligature, injuries, and analyze those based upon the current forensic and medical science to determine, if I could, what happened to Miss Noble.
Yes, Linda.
And after authoring your report, did you review additional materials?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Does that include a forensic anthropologist report authored by Dr. Heather Garvin?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Does that include a report authored by John Bolte?
Yes, ma'am,
These
I did.
people are
And
literally
he's
the
also
worst
a doctor,
people.
Just unclear they're PhD doctors for Mr. Bolte.
That is correct.
And a
And
PhD.
Dr. Garvin,
And,
PhD.
100%.
and then a report authored by the University of Tennessee regarding Ms. Noble.
Provide no
Yes, ma'am.
value to
Do those,
society.
additional documents that review change your opinion in your report at all?
No, ma'am.
Now, your opinions offered today will be made to a reasonable degree of medical and scientific certainty.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and now, before we turn specifically to Emily, I want to talk, actually, I want you to talk about the basic anatomy of the neck. I'm going to hand you a demonstrative aid. I'll hand it to you. I will warn you, it's a little worn on that side. And so can you please explain the basic anatomy of the neck, and if that demonstrative aid is helpful to you, please use it.
Yes, ma'am. So think of our neck. We got a lot of things in our neck. We got skin on the outside. We have bony structures and cartilaginous structures. We have arteries. We have veins. We have structures that keep us alive. So if we start with the skin, okay, we all got skin. If you put your finger right on either side of your voice box, that's your carotid artery. That takes oxygenated blood to the brain. And right on the outside of that is the jugular vein. They're basically side by side. So good blood up, bad blood back to the heart and lungs. Then in the middle, we have our trachea. That's a fancy word for our windpipe. That's our airway. Connected to our airway is our voice box, Adam's apple. It's that big thing right here, more prominent on men than women. Above the voice box and protected by the jaw, if you put your fingers, you have to lift your chin up, put your fingers underneath your jaw, your mandible, and swallow. What you're going to feel between your thumb and index finger is your hyoid bone. So do that and swallow. What you're feeling is this bone in between your thumb and index finger. So it's right up there underneath the jaw. We have our esophagus, which is when we swallow, the food takes from our mouth and throws down to our stomach. So that's kind of the basic anatomy. Skin, blood vessels, good blood up, bad blood down. Voice box, called the laryngeal cartilage, hyoid bone up here underneath the jaw that helps us swallow and helps keep our airway open. And there's some muscles in there too that help us turn our neck.
Do you have your report with you at the stand right there?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Take that so I can use it to refer to on the stand. Do you have a copy of your report with you?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And in your report on page 10, just zoom in, you actually have a diagram, a close-up of the skeletal structure. Can you review where the hyoid bone is at?
Yes, the hyoid bone gets right up here underneath your jaw. So the way you get to it is, you extend your neck and then swallow. You'll feel it right there at the edge of your jaw, right up here. And then,
And you also have marked on that diagram. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I did not get marked. That's correct.
Huh.
All right, and so what have you just circled?
I've circled the hyoid bone. I'm sorry.
And I'll clear that. And then the next box on that diagram is the superior horn thyroid.
I like the way he explains it though.
That's part of the voice box.
Yeah, I mean, he
It's
sounds-
the whole thing called the laryngeal or thyroid cartilage. And coming off the back of the
You know.
thyroid cartilage is what's
Mhm.
called a horn. It sticks up like a horn, right there.
He's got his horns
Now, with that
combed
basic
over.
anatomy in mind, I'd like to turn now to your evaluation.
My
of
question
opinion
to establish
regarding
credibility as a
forensic
jury.
analysis in this case.
Doctor, did Jeffrey
And-
Epstein kill himself?
In your analysis of crime scene, your expertise.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
In differentiating between a hanging and a potential strangulation.
When you look at a crime scene, there are lots of things when you have a hanging you have to evaluate. Is this a suicide or is this a homicide? So things you got to look at. So things that I look at are what is the scene? What does the scene show us? Is there any evidence there that's going to help us figure out what happened? When you see the hanging itself, what type of hanging is it? Meaning it's what we call a complete hanging or an incomplete. Now what that means is a complete hanging means complete and full body weight on that ligature that's around your neck. Incomplete means that some part of your body is in contact with the ground. So that means less pressure on your neck. Then we're going to look at the ligature. What is actually around the neck? Is it thin? Is it wide? Because that's going to tell us information about what kind of pressure is being applied to the neck. When you have something that's thin, it's a lot of pressure in a smaller area. When it's wide, it takes that pressure and spreads it out over
I'm
anatomically.
curious to see what he found, honestly.
So look at that ligature. Does it have any characteristics? For example, is there any pattern imprints from that ligature that gets transferred to the skin if the skin is intact?
Because I think he's
Then we
going
wanna
to
look
just,
at,
I think
are there
he's
any
just going to
features
lecture
that
us. I don't think he's
internally
going
or
to opine on what actually happened.
In this case,
He won't.
we just
He
say,
doesn't.
we look at
Yeah.
injuries. Internal
It's a
injuries.
trick.
What type of internal injuries are there? Are there any
But
broken
this
bones?
works.
Broken bones.
This
How many
works
broken
with
bones?
certain
And
juries.
where are
Yeah.
those broken bones
Mhm.
of cartilage? That's important. Figure out where pressure had been applied to a particular neck. And then there are other things that are also important.
I'll give him this.
What
He goes
did
into
the
this.
patient or victim weigh?
This is the part he does
So
kind
that's
of
very
go into,
important.
but as
The
far
more
as
you
the
weigh, the more
crime
pressure is going to
scene,
be
he
applied
does.
to whatever's around your neck. How old
Gotcha.
are they? What is
But
their
he
sex?
leaves out a
So
ton of
all those
stuff when
things
it
come into
comes to
play. And
this.
then
His
what you do is
reasoning
you
for the
take,
neck
or what I take is I take
injuries
all of that
being
evidence
what they say
and then I
they
look
are.
at based
Yeah.
on what we see.
Well, he's just going
Have
to
I
give
seen
the
something similar
opinion
in my
that
experience?
fits his case.
I
so.
review the medical literature.
The main
Are there
one
other
is
cases
that
in
she
the
was
medical literature that
hanging
describe a
for 4
particular
months.
type of injury, internally,
Huh.
externally, whatever?
She went
so
from
when you take
100 pounds
Knowledge,
to
experience,
19 pounds.
training, literature with the facts that you
Wow.
find
None of
seen in the
that's-
medical facts.
none of
And I
that's-
call that
he
the
doesn't mention
totality
any
of
of
the
that.
evidence. Do I have
Huh.
there enough information there for me to render an
I'm
opinion?
sure that most
in a
people
particular
that
case?
that hang
So I'm
themselves,
going to walk through
they're
each of those
found
factors
pretty much
now,
immediately.
with the remains of
Right.
and how
Yeah.
you
So
discuss
that's
your
what he's
analysis.
basing
The
his
first one you
opinion off
mentioned,
is the
was a
scientific
type of
literature.
hanging.
That I'm
and can you
just guessing that most
describe
people
those
get
2 words
found.
again that you
They don't.
used to
They're not
differentiate
hanging for
between
4
the
months in the
types of
woods.
Yes, ma'am.
Right,
There's
they're found
what's
pretty
called
quickly,
complete
relatively
or
quickly.
incomplete hanging.
Right.
So it's really full
Right.
body weight on that ligature or partial body weight on that ligature. And then under the incomplete hanging, meaning some part of your body is touching the ground, there are 4 different subcategories. And they fall into, is the patient standing? Is the patient kneeling? Is the patient sitting? Or is the patient lying down? And each one of those, again, are important, either from experience or from the medical literature, saying what type of injuries do you see in someone who is standing, sitting, kneeling, or lying down? And so that you take your experience, you take what's in the doctors from around the world have written regarding those positions. And what's particularly important in Emily Noble's case is that was kneeling. So that's an incomplete
Go
kneeling
straight. I didn't
position,
say which
is
side
very
I
important
ended
when
up
we
on. I
analyze
just
the
was asking the
evidence in this
question.
case.
And so the type of hanging dictates the amount of pressure on someone's neck.
Yes. So the complete hanging, and so you think of somebody who jumps off a balcony with something around their neck. Okay, their full body weight is going to be suspended by whatever rope, wire, whatever they put around their neck. So all that weight, whatever they weigh, 200 pounds, 250 pounds, whatever, it's all right here. So that's the complete. Now, so that incomplete, meaning there is going to be less pressure, whatever is around that person's neck, and depending on what position they're in, it's going to go from standing is going to be the most in an incomplete, and then it gets less as you go from sitting, kneeling, and lying down. So it's just how much weight is along here, because that's going to dictate what do we see on the skin or inside.
And so it's critical when you're analyzing an incomplete hanging scene to understand the position of the body.
Absolutely, that is critical.
And you talked also about one of the factors you consider is weight. How does an individual's weight affect the pressure applied in an incomplete or complete hanging?
Again, the more you weigh, anybody, the more pressure is going to be on whatever is around your neck. So
I mean, that's
That-
kind of
that-
common sense, but
is so important because we look at their doctors who have evaluated literature
Yeah.
hangings based upon the weight of the individual. And they looked at cases where is there a breaking point where there are no fractures below a certain weight? In the medical literature, there is. There are no fractures in the neck below 110 pounds in an incomplete hanging.
And so it's important to
As if everybody's bones are the same.
Absolutely.
Everybody's neck bones are the same. So at some point, there's just not enough weight to break the bones.
Your
It's just
discussion
not-
of
it's
looking
not
at the
so.
literature. That's an important
Right.
factor in your consideration as
Everybody's
Yeah, that
bones
seems-
are going to be
Yes, ma'am.
proportional to their body.
What is
Right.
yeah,
the characteristic
different
of that literature?
different
Ligature.
strengths and different
Is it,
all kinds of different things.
What's its width?
Yes.
What's it
There's
made of?
just
Does
too
it
many
stretch?
factors. There's
You
too
know, how
many.
wide is it?
There's too many factors
Because-
involved.
What I would do is look at the width. So based upon a particular width of ligature, that's where that pressure is going to be applied. If it's an inch, that means we've got an inch of pressure. If it's a quarter inch, that means a quarter inch of pressure. And why that's so important to look at is looking at where are there injuries in a particular neck. If I've got, just as an example, a quarter inch ligature up here, and I've got bruises and stuff down here, not consistent with a ligature here. Something else happened to that individual. So if you look at that width and then see, can that width apply enough pressure to cause particular injuries in any particular case?
And you looked at the photographs from the crime scene where Ms. Noble's remains were found,
Yes, ma'am, I did.
and you evaluated or you observed the ligature depicted in those photographs?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
All right, and then you included one of those in your report on page 3, correct? All right, so I'm going to actually show you, though, the photograph from BCI agent Chad Holcomb, which I believe states 108G. Yeah, this too, so you can see it a little bit better. And Are you able to observe the ligature in this photograph?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And what observations did you make that were important to your analysis of the scene?
If we can we zoom in on that picture? What is,
Zoom it now. No, I need it back.
oh, sorry.
More?
More. Yeah, I think that we can see that. What's important when we look at this, we can see clearly there's a loop going down. Look at the loop on the left. This side, I'm going to draw an arrow to that one. Oops. That's a single cord, single loop. So that's the loop that has pressure. So we have pressure from a single cord. When it comes back up the other side, there are two, but now if we go down and look at the end of that USB, there's no weight on that portion of the cord. So one of those coming down on the right has no pressure because it's the one that goes around and comes down over her back. So one loop of USB cord is taking all the pressure.
And that, Your Honor, one thing I didn't do on my break was get out the USB cord. So I need a moment to do that.
If there was still skin, it'd be mummified.
Oh, go ahead, thank you. I'm sorry.
He's making
True,
the point that the cord's not wide enough to cause breaking in the two separate bones.
Now I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 109.
But
And
she was out there
I'm
for
going to
4
ask you to
months.
pull it out of the back, please.
Right.
She was
It's
volatile.
previously been admitted as the cord.
This
that
is
was
not a
taken from
typical
the scene.
case.
No, not at all. And he doesn't mention it. Diane does. Diane does.
And you observed in your review that obviously that cord was cut.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and that's the long part of the cord, though, correct?
And not taking a picture of being cut down.
And approximately what diameter
Or
is that cord?
Taken down correctly.
Right.
Looks maybe a little less than a quarter.
We just snip, snip. Here we go.
And so, based upon your review of the ligature and the photographs involving Emily's remains, can you demonstrate wrapping that cord on this demonstrative aid?
Yes, ma'am. So when
What
you,
the?
What the
No.
fuck?
if something's put around your neck and you lean forward, it will go to this area in here.
Yeah, but we have skin and muscles
So
and
what will happen
fucking all kinds of other stuff.
That is, in this case, there'll be
This
pressure
is
from a
bullshit.
That is
single loop
bullshit.
being applied up under Emily Noble's neck, applying pressure to this part of the neck.
Look at Grubbs. He's all
Now, the question comes based on
look at him.
Noble's
He's all
anatomy.
paying attention like
And
it's all
what
serious.
will
Look at him.
something less than a quarter of an inch compress, it
Wonder what he's
expresses
talking
against the
about.
structures in her neck.
And ultimately, can that ligature cause the injuries in her neck?
No, ma'am. What we saw from the forensic anthropologist report were those 4 fractures, different locations, here, here, and then here, down where this horn comes off, here and here. So you've got a significant distance between these 4 and or 2 on either side, anatomical structure here and here. If you are applying pressure in a less than quarter-inch area, it's physically impossible for you to apply pressure on here and here at the same time. Then there isn't enough, it's not wide. If this were a 1-inch ligature, yeah, you could apply pressure at both at the same time. But with a less than quarter-inch piece of
But again,
ligature,
you're
you can't
pressing
anatomically put
skin
pressure on
and
both
shit
at the same time.
as well. So
This demonstrative
Gotta
aid
come
is
into
it's
it.
a little, it's not life size, right?
No, this is many times life size.
And so in your experience, and if you want to go ahead and put that over there, that's fine. Approximately, there is a distance between the hyoid bone and the thyroid cartilage,
Yes, ma'am.
and that is greater than a quarter-inch.
Yes, ma'am.
It is greater than a half-inch.
Yes, ma'am.
So even if that cord was wound around twice, it still wouldn't account for the entire distance between the hyoid bone and the thyroid cartilage.
No, ma'am.
All right, and the distance greater than 3/4 of an inch.
And we're probably getting closer depending upon anatomic size. At autopsies, that distance between here and here is somewhere between 3/4 and 1 inch.
And so we've talked about the ligature and why it's a consideration for you.
Yes, ma'am.
And you discussed how the ligature, well, I want to jump ahead and I'm going to come back to the ligature. One of the factors you talked about were also examining the location and the nature of any injuries involved in a crime scene with someone at a crime scene, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you did that in this case with Emily Noble's remains.
Yes, ma'am.
And so discuss the location and the nature of the injuries.
So when we look at the, she had several. She had the 4 fractures, 2 of the hyoid, 2 of the superior horn of the laryngeal cartilage. She also had evidence of a fracture of her nose. So looking at
Notice what he said there. He said fracture,
those
singular.
5 fractures that we
Right.
see, how are they explained? But clearly, in order for
He's saying
any
there's
part
an
of the body to
additional
sustain a
fracture,
you got to have some
singular.
sort of blunt force trauma.
What did you
There
just
has to be
say?
some pressure applied to here, here, and here. So I looked at those and analyzed those, and that was part of my opinion.
And so the fractures for the hyoid bone, where were those located again?
There's a good picture. You can actually see it.
On page 5 of your report?
That was part of it. Yes, we can look at page 5. That will be. So the circled red areas, left is the one on your right. It's the left side, and the right side is on your left. So that, and what's interesting, the fracture on the left is what we call a transverse fracture. It goes straight across. The fracture on the left, or her right, your left, is, can I draw on the screen? So, thank you. So,
Well, Dr. Scott, let me just direct you a little bit if I can. Because I would just say general, we've already heard from the forensic anthropologist. How many fractures are on the hyoid bone?
there are 2 now.
All right, and would you consider those to be bilateral fractures?
Yes, ma'am.
And within those 2 fractures, that means there were 2 blunt force traumas or 2 pressures exerted to cause those fractures.
That is correct.
And then with regards to the thyroid cartilage, how many fractures were observed there?
There were 2.
And then same questions, were those bilateral
Yes, ma'am.
and requires separate pressure to cause each of those fractures?
That is correct.
Now, when you were
Yeah.
considering
Well, that's like your
a crime scene
opinion,
analysis
man.
such as this with Ms. Noble's Renee, you're looking at
Yeah.
the fractures and you're comparing them
Totally his
Correct.
opinion.
to the literature, or excuse me, literature. Is it important to consult the literature
Yes, ma'am.
while you do that?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Why?
No, I just
okay.
said,
Okay,
is it
yes, I'm sorry.
important?
Yes, ma'am, it's important.
Now, in your training and experience, have you ever seen the same fracture pattern to a woman weighing less than 110 pounds?
No, ma'am. Never seen it personally, and it's not in the medical literature.
Have you seen any bilateral fractures to just the hyoid bones in your experience to a woman weighing less than 110
This
pounds?
guy.
No, ma'am.
So not even just the bilateral hyoid fractures.
The medical literature that looks at types of fractures, in this case, women less than 110 pounds, there is no report anywhere that I've been able to find that says the type of fracture that Emily had in her neck was caused by a hanging. It's not there.
And you said fracture, but it's important to be 4 fractures.
4 fractures, bilateral fractures, both sides, here and here. I haven't found a case anywhere from hanging. Lots of cases from strangulation, but no cases from hanging. None.
That's all he says about strangulation. That's it. He doesn't go into
And
why.
does the fact that, going back to those factors of your crime scene analysis, that Emily weighed 100 pounds, or roughly that's what the testimony has been.
Because
does
he
that
doesn't have
impact your
anything
analysis
else.
regarding the fractures caused to her neck?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
And is it your opinion that those 4 fractures with the weight of Emily Noble could not have been caused by an incomplete hanging?
Absolutely, they could not. She doesn't have enough weight to apply pressure to those structures to cause those fractures.
And is it your opinion then that the crime scene that you've reviewed,
Your Honor, can I object to the leading question?
Oh, you're
What is your opinion?
what is your opinion regarding the scene that you reviewed? Check that, let me wait a little bit. And then you indicated also that in reviewing those crime scenes, you consider the totality of all of the evidence.
That's correct.
And what additional factors besides the literature, besides the 4 fractures in the neck, besides her age and weight, did you consider?
I considered the nature of the scene. I considered the fact that she had an additional fracture of her nose.
Singular
There's
fracture,
another.
additional fracture.
Yeah.
That the
Right.
injuries that she sustained
Mm-hmm.
were not from a ligature. The type of injuries that Emily has in her neck, the 4 here, are the type of injuries that you see with manual strangulation, not with a ligature. Doesn't exist in the medical literature
And what
Never
did he
a
say
reported
about the
case.
scene?
anywhere. Looking at that medical literature of thousands, more than 1,000 cases
Nothing.
studied by forensic pathologists around the
Nothing.
world, in women less than 110 pounds, it doesn't exist in an incomplete kneeling position. That's
So
the
he goes into
totality
the
of evidence.
medical literature and can't find anything,
regarding
anybody
the
of
scene
M
where Emily's
size
remains were at.
having
Yes,
those
ma'am, I do.
fractures
Right,
and
I'm
an
gonna review
incomplete
just
hanging.
Right.
Few of those.
Well, without all the ins and outs of like her being out there for 4 months. That's my
Mhm.
contention.
Let's start
That
with
she,
opinion
I mean, she,
number
her,
Yeah.
two.
I don't mean to be too graphic,
Can you read that for the
but I'm
jury,
going to
please?
say
Yes, ma'am.
Emily was lucky to have
Emily
her
Noble's death
head
was
attached
staged
to
to
her.
appear to be a suicidal hanging.
And number
I mean,
three.
that's in all
Ms. Emily Noble's
actuality,
death,
that's
excuse
true.
me, did
4
not die as
months.
a consequence of an injury.
Mm-hmm.
Going from 100 pounds to 19 pounds, she's very, very lucky to even have her head still attached to her
Right.
body.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
that. I mean,
I'm gonna physics the find people in the chat real quick. So mass is only one part of the equation. F equals m times a, or force equals mass times acceleration. So he's not accounting for any of the acceleration for the drop at all, and that's basic fucking physics. So the break
Well,
could
are
be
you talking about like her dropping from a hanging?
Yeah. You're not taking in the rate of acceleration. So if you threw herself down, then you have to take in the acceleration of the body and the stop distance. So the stop, that's the third part of that equation. Force, the force on the bone would be the mass, which was her weight, which was, what did you say, 96 pounds, 100 pounds almost?
Yeah, she was about
So
95 pounds. Yeah.
if the acceleration is 1.25, that of a normal acceleration, you're back at your 110 pound threshold. So even if it's a quarter more than the normal acceleration of a hanging, so if she jumped or if she pushed herself down with a minute additional force, that translates, and you get a higher amount of force, which would break the bone. And this asshole should know that.
Mm-hmm.
He's just throwing a bunch of gook at you and expecting this jury to believe him. Just believe him. That's basically what he's saying. Just believe me. You don't have to figure out all this out when I'm telling you folks. Just trust me. I'm telling you
Right.
the truth. It's
Just disingenuous as all shit. So
I'm an expert. Listen to me.
right.
Right.
You have to take in that acceleration piece, and a just mildly above nominal would easily make up for that extra 10 pounds that he's finding in his finding, which he doesn't display his findings, what the normal drop rate is, or what the normal distance of drop, or any of that. So this is a disingenuous argument. And Dr. Comeover, I'd love to debate you on this shit. Call me, brother.
He won't. Trust me, he won't. He's not making a ton of money. It's not like he's rich. You know what I mean? So he's probably just hanging out.
But never believe an expert in court. Yes, because they're gonna lie. But no, that bothered the shit out of me. Sorry, I had to drop in and drop that little piece of knowledge because
Right. I don't want to go into that too much, but when they hang themselves this way, there isn't a lot of. It's not a violent thing. What they're trying to do is they're trying to just to cut off the blood circulation to their brain so that they pass out. That's what they're trying to do. So a lot of people think you're talking about this force thing. I'm sure she did it in a very, very like as peaceful as she could, as gentle as she could.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just kind of lean into it. You know what I mean? And just So I'm not saying what you're saying isn't right, but I'm just I don't see a lot of like downforce happening. It just was more of a
what I'm saying.
I don't know.
No, I completely understand what you're saying, and I'm just saying from the scientific perspective, it's there is a force associated with that equation, even if it is a small amount of force, and the difference in force wouldn't be. She wouldn't have had to drop from 30 feet to make up that difference. I'm saying just a slight additional pressure because the threshold's so close. So I'm disproving him on the scientific basis of it as well. Okay. So yeah. So it wouldn't have been anything magnificent. It was just it would have been just a slight increase, would have easily made up for that threshold. So
and the increase of her going from 100 pounds to 19 pounds, that alone would stretch that would break those bones.
Yeah.
And they're of course drying out, being brittle, all that additional information.
Right.
Basically, he's a fucking liar, and he knows he's wrong.
Yeah. And people need to know that that's what this guy's doing is lying, and he's doing it.
Yep.
And the state's using him, and they don't care. They're using him because they want a conviction. It's not the truth. That's not what they're looking for. These are dangerously stupid people. Let's just go dangerous anyway. You know.
Right.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. So, all right, we'll continue.
Complete the partial body weight suicidal hanging.
And number 4.
Miss Emily Noble sustained at least one episode of manual strangulation, which resulted in 4 separate and distinct fractures of the hyoid and thyroid cartilage around the time of her death. The complex bilateral fracture pattern is not consistent with a ligature strangulation from the cord documented at the scene.
Your Honor, we've been going almost 2 hours. Do you want me to keep going for a little bit, or do you want to take a break? It's probably a good place to break if we can.
Okay.
I promise I won't be lengthy when we come back.
Fair enough. Let's take a 10-minute break. Remember, close session.
Oh shit! I could have waited 5 seconds.
Yeah.
We'll skip to the break here.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll put those on the overhead and we'll walk through them.
I agree.
No lies detected.
I'm going to strike my question since I handed the photographs and re-ask it. All right. 108 I. In this photograph of Emily Noble's remains, and I'll zoom in, do observe a knot in this area.
It appears it's right there. I'm sorry.
Is that a knot or the end of the cord looking out?
Maybe the end of the cord. Yeah, it's hard to see from that photo.
I mean, the leading nature gun.
That's right.
What about up here?
Yes, there's a knot.
Right here?
Did I find out what started the fire? No, I did not. I should look into that though.
That's important to your decision, though.
Objection, Your Honor, it's deleting. Is all the
That's next one.
The nature of the ligature and how it hangs. What is the importance of that to you?
The importance is looking at what part of that ligature is in contact with the neck. Is it single or double? Is what's important.
You don't know that because you didn't witness
Now,
it because
in
they
your
didn't
opinion,
photograph or
that
cut
we
it
talked about
down
before we went to break, you
appropriately.
used the words manual
Exactly.
strangulation, so I want to focus now on what is strangulation.
Strangulation is the application of external pressure to the neck, blocking airflow, blood flow, or both. All depends on how pressure is being applied.
And can you demonstrate?
Yes, ma'am. I won't squeeze. So you can apply pressure to the neck in many ways. You can apply manual strangulation with hands. That would squeeze the neck. You can apply pressure with a bicep and forearm with the neck right here. You could put a ligature around somebody's neck and pull back. So any of those ways is strangulation because they're all putting pressure on the neck, blocking airflow, blood flow, or both.
And what happens to the veins and arteries in a neck when pressure is applied?
They collapse, meaning they close off, and they stop blood flow to and from the brain.
And so what happens to the blood?
It stops. If you block the arteries, nothing can get up to the brain. So what that means is through these arteries, your brain is seeing less oxygen. And when you block the vein, blood can't go back to the heart to be circulated back up again, reoxygenate back up again. So you block the good blood going up and you block the bad blood, deoxygenated blood from going back to the heart and lungs.
And so when blood is blocked by the external pressure, what is the result of that in the human body?
What happens is because the brain requires oxygen to work. We have in the cells in the brain, we have no oxygen reserve. So once the oxygen levels in the brain fall below a certain level, things start to happen. You see spots because that says your brain isn't, the part of your brain that helps it see isn't getting enough oxygen. And then in less than 10 seconds, actually based on a study, it's an average of 6.8 seconds, a human will go unconscious when you deprive the human brain of oxygen in the blood.
And so brain cells die.
For every second after you're unconscious that the brain is not getting oxygenated blood, cells die. And there's different types of cells in the brain. So some cells die first, and some cells are more resistant to the lack of oxygen, and they die last. Because we have different types of cells in the brain that do different things. So yes, but for every second the brain goes without oxygen after you're unconscious, brain cells are dying.
And can that cause medical conditions?
Oh yes, ma'am. It can cause brain damage, and if it goes on long enough, death.
And in your training and experience, those medical conditions, are they considered serious?
Oh yes, ma'am. Serious, life-threatening.
And what are the risks?
Well, depends on how long the brain goes without oxygen, up to death, brain damage and death. If you tear the arteries in the neck, it's called a carotid or vertebral artery dissection, you can stroke and then die, or just stroke and live, depending on how much of your brain dies. You can have tears in your windpipe that can cause problems. You can have hematomas, which are collections of blood in the muscles of the neck. You can have tears in the esophagus, so the tube that takes the food from the throat to the stomach can be ripped and torn. Anything in the neck. Vocal cord paralysis, vocal cord damage can occur when you put pressure on a human's neck.
What about fractures?
Fractures, absolutely.
Where?
Depends on where that pressure is applied. If you squeeze the hyoid bone, you can get fractures. You squeeze the larynx, the voice box, you can get fractures. If you squeeze down here, you can get fractures of the cricoid cartilage, fractures of the trachea, the windpipe. So it all depends on where you apply that pressure, what is going to get injured underneath that manual strangulation.
And what is the amount of pressure needed to cause the injuries you described?
To block blood flow from the brain in the vein, it's 4.4 pounds. To block blood flow going up to the brain, the carotid artery takes 11 pounds. To fracture the hyoid bone takes less than 10 pounds. To completely close the trachea, the windpipe, takes 33 to 34 pounds of pressure. So depending on where you put the pressure and how much will then dictate what structures will be damaged, closed, fractured.
And what is the pressure of an average handshake?
Average adult male handshake is 80 to 100 pounds of pressure. Average female handshakes are 60 to 80 pounds of pressure.
Both of those are sufficient to block the veins and arteries.
Oh, way more, up to 10 times over.
And what happens physiologically to the body when blood flow to the brain is cut off?
The brain won't work. So the first thing, I don't know if you've ever fainted, when you experience fainting, what do you experience? You see stars. What that is not enough oxygen getting to the brain, not because you're being strangled, but because your blood is pooling into your legs or some other part of the body. So that's the first symptom. And it could be that you just can't breathe if pressure is being applied to your throat, to your windpipe. But most strangulations are blood flow. So you start having changes in your vision, feel lightheaded, dizzy, and then you go unconscious. And after you go unconscious, if that pressure is maintained, things will happen to your brain as it begins to die and shut down. You lose control of your bladder and you will pee on yourself if you have urine in your bladder. You will defecate, poop on yourself if you have stool in the rectal vault. And then if that pressure is maintained somewhere between 1 and 2.5 minutes, then the part of your brain that controls your ability to breathe dies. It's part of the brainstem. It's
Never
the
heard
last
of
part of
that.
the brain to die.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Pressure's maintained for long enough, somewhere between 1 and 2.5 minutes, then you will stop.
Forget I
breathing,
said anything then.
and then you're dead.
And would those physiological responses?
I've never heard of that, though.
Would a witness?
That's weird.
Yes, ma'am.
It's
They're
a
going to
weird way to
see
explain it.
someone, depending on how the pressure is applied, could be struggling to breathe, could be seeing their eyes roll back and the individual go unconscious, then see them pee on themselves if there's urine in the bladder, or poop on themselves if there's stool in your rectal vault, and then stop breathing.
And
What's saying
what
that?
would happen if someone?
Yeah, that's a weird way to describe it.
The fractures
Sure.
here, you're going to have, you won't be able to speak because
Just say defecate. Like that's
Right.
that's all you.
any bones
You
in
don't
there
need the
are
extra descriptive.
painful, because in our bone ends we have sensory endings, so you're going to have extreme pain to swallow. You're going to have difficulty talking because the structure, if you have fractures of your laryngeal cartilage, that's going to inhibit your ability to breathe and to speak
And to scream?
and to scream.
I'm placing on the overhead pages 8 and 9 of your report. And included in the report are these photographs. And were these photographs?
Yeah, I don't like this doctor, guys.
Yes, ma'am, they were.
And why?
These photographs were taken the night or on the May 24th, Emily's, I believe it was her birthday. And what it shows is there's no trauma to Emily's face or neck.
And with the fractures that she sustained to her neck, would you expect to see that had it been? had it occurred?
Had those fractures been, she would be having difficulty breathing, speaking, and should be in the emergency department for emergency treatment, probably an emergency airway.
Jesus Christ. This
Look at
guy
how
really
big
is
that
an asshole.
model thing is. Look how huge that neck is. It's like 3
Right.
times as big as his neck.
Right.
He should just wear it as a mask.
Look, he's a weird dude, man. He's a strange guy.
And you have
Yeah, he
authored
is.
it's contained in your report, page 13, the physiological consequences of strangulation diagram.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you discuss this for the jury?
Yes, ma'am. This is a physiologic timeline. Time 0 being when pressure is applied to the neck, blocking blood flow to your brain. What happens to you or to any human when blood flow stops flowing to your brain? So first thing in time 0 is pressure applied to the neck. Blood flow to the carotids stopped. So within 5 to 10 seconds, the average of 6.8 seconds, a individual will go unconscious. After they go unconscious, if pressure is maintained on their neck, then they have what's called an anoxic seizure. This is where some part of their body will shake. It could be an arm, could be a leg, could be the whole body. Will shake for a very short period of time. And that occurs an average of 14 seconds. The range based on studies is somewhere between 11 and 17 seconds is when that anoxic seizure will occur. Then if pressure is maintained at 15-second mark as the brain begins to die and your bodily function shut down, the ability to hold your sphincter for our bladder releases and we will pee on ourselves. And at that 30-second mark, other sphincters, other brain damage is occurring, then our rectal sphincter dilates, and if we have poop, stool, we will defecate on ourselves. And then if pressure is maintained somewhere between that 62-second and 150-second, 7-second mark, then you will stop breathing.
And so 157 seconds, you're dead.
And that is correct. Somewhere between that 1 and 2.5 minute mark, you're done because your respiratory center in the brain is brain damage has occurred and you will not breathe again.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to demonstrate by setting a minute on my watch. Do you have a timer with you on your watch? I'll let you do it.
I
Through
do.
your phone?
That's it. Okay.
And when you press, just say start and then stop it at 62 seconds.
Start.
Look,
For this entire
you're
time,
zooming in on me.
consistent pressure needs to be applied to the neck.
Yeah,
Seems like
that's
some
wrong.
grandstanding
I'm, like,
bullshit.
I'm trying to figure
Mhm.
out what they're trying to do. Exactly.
They're trying to demonstrate how much time it takes for someone to pass from strangulation to show
Right.
that it's not very long.
So it's theatrics, right? It's just
Mhm.
Absolutely.
look at it. Look what kind of watch does he got? Is that a Timex?
Looks like it.
Yeah.
Stop.
And
How
seconds.
embarrassing.
That was 62 seconds.
And for 62 seconds,
62
consistent
seconds.
pressure must be applied to the neck. Now, in your experience, when someone is strangled, what physical signs may be present on the outside of the body?
On the outside, there may be no marks on the outside of the body. The presence or absence of marks on the neck all depends on how that pressure is being applied. If you put a bicep and forearm on somebody's neck, you will not see a mark. They can be dead and no marks on the outside of the neck.
It
because
can
it's
be
a broad
real.
surface,
It just
it's a broad
doesn't need
surface.
to be stated.
If you put
Yes.
Fucking
a
weird
hand
way
on
of
somebody's
stating
neck,
it.
Yeah.
you can see, sometimes you can see fingertip impressions, circular bruises. Sometimes you can see scrapes from the fingernails. Sometimes you can actually see what we call a pattern imprint, where if a finger is being pushed up against a
Why
part
is
of
he
the body,
talking about it?
what happens is where there's pressure from your finger, when you take the finger away, it's white underneath, and you can see an outline of the fingers. So it depends on how that pressure is being applied. If you take
He's talking
a
about
ligature
evidence that might have been
and you
there.
put it around somebody's neck,
Mhm.
and you
Right.
pull,
It could have
what you-
been there.
That
then you're
wasn't.
getting
We
all
don't
that
know.
pressure is in that one small area, and then you expect to see a ligature mark of some sort. So it all depends on how pressure is applied. You can be strangled to death and have no marks on the outside of your neck, zero. So it depends on how pressure is being applied, whether you're going to see injury or not.
Does it also include the state of the body in which you're examining?
Does anybody really
Yes,
believe
if
that
the-
you can be strangled
There are
to
other
death
things that
manually and
how
not
much
leave
is
any
the
marks on
victim
the
able
outside?
to fight back
No
and
It
bruising,
seems
nothing?
pretty
pull
far fetched
perpetrators
to me.
from
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, but I
How much
find
they
that
may
hard to believe.
How many times was that pressure being applied? Was it one continuous pressure, or
You're
was
just
it
gonna keep
pressure,
talking until
and
you're
then
just like,
things
you
come
know
off
what?
because
He's
the victim's
fucking
able to fight
guilty.
back,
He's
comes
getting
on
out of my
again, back and forth. So there are
Right.
lots of things that will
Yeah.
dictate the presence or absence of bruises.
As long as
Medical
this guy
conditions,
stops
patient on
talking to me,
medications,
I'll
aspirin,
fucking
blood
say he's
thinners,
guilty.
those all
Get him
come
out
into
of
play
here.
as well.
Right.
Did you observe any of those on Emily's remains?
No, ma'am.
And were you
Well,
able
how
to
could
make
you
those
say there was
observations
nothing
based on the
there?
state of her remains?
No,
Oh,
ma'am. She was decomposed. You could not evaluate the skin.
That's right. It's just, why are you talking about?
Right.
The internal signs of strangulation that could be found during an autopsy.
It depends on where and how pressure is applied to a human's neck. If you've got pressure that's down here, collapsing the airway, at autopsy, you may see nothing. I've seen cases where I know the airway was completely collapsed because it was on videotape. And at autopsy, there were no marks to the windpipe itself. You can see hemorrhage of the
I call
muscles of the neck.
bullshit.
If you
Who
squeeze a
videotaped them
particular
strangling
set of
somebody to
muscles
death?
hard enough, it can cause them to bruise. So at
Have a
autopsy,
good
you will
night,
see
Red.
hemorrhage within the neck.
Good night,
If you
Red.
squeeze the voice box, you can see fractures here. If you squeeze the hyoid, you can see fractures here. So it all depends on where pressure is applied. You can actually see, when you see pressure way up here, you can actually at autopsy see hemorrhage at the base of the tongue. It can go that high. So it all depends on how the pressure is applied, how much pressure is applied, how many times that pressure is applied, what injuries you're going to see at living or dead.
Did you observe internal injuries on the remains of Emily Noble consistent with strangulation?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What?
The fractures. That
Would it be
pattern
better to
of
just use a
bilateral
pill?
fractures
One would think. I'm
of the
not an
hyoid and
expert
the lower
either, but
cartilage, that's the type of injury that you see when you're manually strangled, because pressure has to be applied to both sides. Something has to squeeze pressure on the right and left to cause those injuries. Okay, so the injuries that Emily had, they are what you expect to see and what I have seen in many cases of manual strangulation, those exact same injuries.
what injuries? You haven't said any fucking injuries.
When someone is being strangled, strike that. Answer that. What happens if the pressure is released while someone's being strangled?
It depends on how far down the timeline they've gone. When pressure is released and blood starts flowing back to the brain, depending on how long they've been unconscious and how much brain damage has occurred, will dictate how quickly do they wake up. And so if you put pressure on somebody's neck for 8 seconds and they go unconscious and you take the pressure off, they're going to wake up. However, if you put pressure on somebody's neck for 15, 20, 30 seconds, brain damage has occurred, and part of the brain that helps us create memory is going to be damaged. So, but depending on how far down the timeline you've gone when blood starts to reflow is going to show us what the degree of injury did that person sustain during that strangulation.
And the continuous pressure increases their life-threatening injuries.
Yes, the longer the brain is deprived of oxygen, the more brain damage is going to occur from blood flow. But you could have life-threatening injuries even if you didn't go unconscious. If you squeeze and you fracture the larynx, the hyoid, that's a life-threatening injury. And that could be done like this and they would never go unconscious. So again, it just depends on where and how that pressure is applied.
And in non-fatal strangulation cases, have you seen victims require hospitalization?
Hey, Jacob
Yes, ma'am.
Castro. I do share your opinion on the come over, buddy. He's over on Rumble all by himself. Well, Ghost Tree's over there, but what's the Keebler have to put in?
that's wish.com Wolverine.
They're after me, Lucky Charms.
I want to go back to just a moment, Your Honor, almost finished, to these pictures from May 24th of 2020. And we'll just put page 9 of your report up. You indicated that there's no neck injuries depicted.
That's correct.
And from your review of the materials, there were, in your works, facial fractures.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you expect to see those in this photograph?
Yes, ma'am. There was
External evidence.
external evidence on the nose.
All right, now returning back to your opinion. And again, you were able to form this opinion to a reasonable degree of medical and scientific certainty.
Yes, ma'am.
believe you already reviewed 2, 3, and 4, but can you review number 5, 6, and 7?
Yes, ma'am. Number 5, Ms. Emily Noble sustained significant blunt force trauma to her face, resulting in an acute facial fracture sometime after 4:18 p.m. on May 24th, 2020. I agree with the autopsy. Number 6, I agree with the autopsy findings and opinions of Dr. Ann Castellone Richmond and Dr. Lee Lehman. And number 7, I agree with the findings and opinions of Angela Harden, M.A., and Amanda Agnew, Ph.D.
And again, is it your opinion to a reasonable degree of medical and scientific certainty that Emily Noble was strangled with continuous pressure for more than 62 seconds?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on what?
And that this pressure to her neck was so great as to cause 4 fractures?
Yes, ma'am.
In your opinion, is that her death was not a suicide?
Objection, Your Honor, has to be answered more than 10.
I think he's answering the question.
No further questions.
Thank you. Cross, please.
Rumble does count too. I just often forget about it. It's not my fault. I like Rumble better.
Diane Menashe, on behalf of Matt Moore. Just, so much talk about how important weight is and being sure that we're making sure that things are accurate. So this is not representative of a 5-foot woman that's 96 pounds, right?
Anatomically, it is correct.
That's not my
Size-wise,
question. Size-wise, sir.
okay, no, you didn't say size, but size-wise, you are absolutely correct. That is not the size of a 5-foot woman.
I mean, okay, so here I am, 5'8", right? Just so we have some scale, right? I'm 5'8", let's just hypothetically say. So you can put that down. I wanna go
See,
back
she's
a
taller
bit to
than
the
Emily.
tutorial about Ms. Menashe's
Emily was
size.
5 foot, by the way.
Next question.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So many times I heard you say, and I want to make sure, no
But Diane's
literature,
not
no
taller.
literature that says that you could not have the bilateral fractures in the 2 different locations and it to be a hanging. And you said there's no literature that says that about weight. Do you remember all that times?
Yes,
So I want to be sure then, showing the witness what is going to be marked as defendant's II, you must not, well, let me back up. I want to really make sure that literature is something that's published.
that is correct.
Okay. Showing you what's been marked as defendant's II in the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology. Let me scoot that down so you're sure to see the whole thing. You see that?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure you were familiar with this literature since you testified at great length that there is not one thing, nothing, nowhere. I'll just move it so they are removed. I'm sure you're aware of this study. 1995, a total of 109 cases of suicide or accidental hangings. And let me, if I can, just go right to the data in the chart with respect to the 109 cases. I'll let that focus. Of the 109 cases, between the ages of 21 and 30, there was one person that had the 4 fractures. 31 to 40, there was 2 people that had the 4 fractures. 41 to 50, 1 person. 51 to 60, where Emily's Noble's range was 3 people. I'm sure you're familiar with that study, and that study does not ever mention weight, does it not?
Well, I'm not familiar with that study, and I'm not sure whether this study actually broke down the difference between complete and incomplete. And so if it doesn't break those down, and particularly the incomplete, then that article is worthless, because what we have to do is look at
Wow.
what is the literature associated with the injuries that we see in Emily Noble. So
So let's go through
if you can show me that this says
Sure.
the article
Let's
is
go through the
incomplete,
article.
if I can answer my question.
You'll have an opportunity on redirect again. Let's go through the article, right?
Please.
Especially in 7 cases with all the horns of the throat, the knot, and the highest point of the ligature was localized in the center. Do you see that right there? Here's why I asked you about that. Isn't it true that all this discussion that you were asked about, there is no picture showing how the ligature was around her neck, correct?
Correct.
That is correct. It's folded over.
You were not at the scene to see how the ligature was around her neck, correct?
That is correct.
There is no one that saw that, right? Well, the picture you don't have it, and you were not there.
That is correct. I was not there.
You also were not there and do not know if Over the course of 4 months, the ligature began in one place and ended up in the other as the corpse went from a 90-pound woman to being 18 pounds of skeleton. You do not know that either because you were not there.
That is correct.
Just to go back here to in our series, 7 of 9 individuals, so 6%, showed fractures of all horns of the throat skeleton, supporting the observations that such injuries can occur in hanging. Do you see that sentence? Yes or no?
I do see that sentence.
Now, I guess you brought up the weight argument because in your report, no, lower the voice. Can't help. In your report that's dated May 27th of 2021, you would agree, and let me know if you need a copy. You would agree that nowhere in that report do you even mention, not even mention, Emily's weight.
That is correct.
And now today, all these important findings are based on her weight that you've talked about. Would you agree with me on that?
No, not all the important findings.
And I want to just talk about why now weight has become important.
See, he looks
Because
really
after you
defensive
issued
on the
your
stand,
report, you
though.
had a chance
So
to
this
review the
is not a
expert
good
report
look.
Of my expert, Dr.
This is
Heather Gardner.
probably why it didn't
I did
work.
have the opportunity
You
after
were aggressive with him.
And since you were asked about reviewing the report, you then know that Dr. Garvin, in her report, cited literature which specifically said the fourfold fractures, 3 cases from 6 were incomplete hangings in that type of double fracture, right?
Yeah, so 10%
But I
has
guess
4
your
fractures.
distinction is now is that those articles are for adult males that weighed more than Emily.
Yes, the article that you're referring to, there were 3 individuals, some weighed as much as, actually 2 weighing 242 pounds to have that.
So I have a question about that line of testimony. Just want to get to your report. So it was my expert that brought the literature to your attention, and now you're addressing the literature that my expert brought to your attention. Does that sound about right?
No, that sounds inaccurate because the attention to the literature is something that I did way before I ever saw Emily.
One moment. I just want to make sure that the articles that I showed you. Oh, here it is. All right. I just thought of something as you were going over this. This is your report. I mean, so I guess then we're talking about, since everything has to be, what we needed then was a study of objection to the editorial. Is there a question? Bilateral fractures
Go ahead.
on just women that were 52 that weighed 92 pounds. And we don't have that study, do we?
Oh, no, ma'am. We do have information regarding that exact question.
Okay, and I'll get to that in a second. I want to ask you about fact page of your report. You talked about this thing where the prosecutor and you 62 seconds.
Oh,
I
Diane,
looked at
fucked
this
up.
and well, 6.8 seconds is based on.
Yeah,
what
he
you
raised
had
his
as
eyebrows
short
and
as
looked at the
adult.
jury.
See that?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
But you're
Mhm.
I
still
got her on that
sitting
one.
here using the tick, 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 right? Even though it says adult male. I mean, would you agree with me that your calculation isn't for a 96-pound woman that's 52,
That's right.
right?
No, those calculations, those studies were all done on adult men, actually 126 males, actually 132.
But you
males.
still use the tick, tick, tick. And I want to talk about
And
that.
females have different bone densities and shit like
Yeah.
that. So,
Mhm.
I want to just talk about that exercise.
I mean, I'm not a
that you were doing.
biologist,
You
but
testified in
Emily
this
had
very court in
osteopenia,
2020, did you not?
which is
Yes, ma'am.
a
Same prosecutor
prelim
did your direct examination.
osteoporosis.
That is correct.
Strangulation
I was
case, you
diagnosed with
testified
it
in the state
10
of
years
Ohio, you
prior.
came up here, you probably sat in that same witness box.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
You did the same, let's set our clock, tick, tick, tick. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that kind of like when you testify, do you have sort of like a shtick or like a thing that you do kind of in every case?
No, ma'am.
So like in that case, you brought in like the Sally, the strangulation Sally doll. Do you remember that?
Oh, very well.
Yeah, and then there's like normal Amanda or Amanda normal or something like that.
Abby Normal?
Abby normal. And then today we have, instead of the dolls, we have this.
That is correct.
so you're an entertainer,
So
not a
Mhm.
doctor.
the testimony
That hairline is entertaining.
about that.
Why did he leave his house knowing that it would look
Someone is
like that?
being,
I mean, what-
pressure is being applied to someone's neck.
Because nobody's ever
And,
challenged
you
him ever in
indicated
his
either
life.
Do they not?
Right.
You were asked questions about what could happen in that 6.8 seconds or 7 seconds. And you were asked the question, could they run away? Right? Do you remember that?
No, ma'am.
And you said no, but they're fight for their life. They're trying to get that pressure off their neck. And then you were asked a question, were you not? Have you ever had experience in seeing cases where victims have fought back? And you said, did you not? Depends on how they're fighting back. They're trying to take the hand away so they can breathe. They're reaching out to gouge out the eye, scratch the person who is attacking them, trying to get them to stop, punch them, scratch them, whatever they can do.
That is correct.
I want to go through your report.
She actually went and found.
Asked you what you're doing the- you're not a pathologist and you're not an anthropologist.
That is correct.
I Googled, I typed in this website. I typed in that website. Would you be surprised to know that there's no website there and it just says,
There's no website
Not
for
at all.
this
Because I've
institute.
purchased a domain, but have never activated the website.
Oh, really?
Oh my.
then let's talk about the
His
institute. In
institute.
quotes, Medicine, law, and justice for the living. You see that?
Yes, ma'am.
And of
Holy
course,
shit.
this is a case about the non-living.
That is correct.
Just want to go just because accuracy is everything, right? Accuracy, it's everything.
Can you be more specific?
Well, is accuracy not ever important?
Oh, it's important.
And you write this report, you write these reports, because how many times this year alone, maybe we can, have
10.
you testified in a courtroom? It's August. How many times have you testified for the state in this year alone?
Probably 10 times.
10 times.
Holy
And
shit.
you've written a report each of those times?
If the report is requested, yes, ma'am.
And you understand, of course, that a report is so important because it's given to the defense, and you know this through the course of your work, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's the basis upon which questioning can be done of you when you testify.
That is correct.
You know, just accuracy. And was 52. You know that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I just want to make sure. I'm going to do a lot of circles here. Photographs. 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 You see all those times I circle photographs?
Yes, ma'am.
Just want to make sure, because the issue has been made about whether decisions can be made on photographs. You never went to the scene on 9/16 of 21.
That is correct. I did not.
You never went to the scene in October, November, December, nor did you go back in March of 2022 when some additional remains were collected.
That is correct. I did not.
Wow.
So your entire conclusions and analysis are based on the documents
Photographs.
and the photographs that you see.
No, ma'am. My conclusions and analysis are based upon many things: education, experience, training, the documents that are listed. in the
Touche,
report.
doctor.
Fair enough. So my question should have been better. Now, the materials you reviewed.
No, I was born an asshole. I didn't grow up this
There is no
way.
video.
No, there is no video.
In fact, there's not even a video or photographs when she's actually cut down from the ligature.
That is correct.
I want to just make sure this right here is the purpose of your review was to examine the injuries, injury mechanism, forensic and medical issues. You see that section of your report?
Yes, ma'am.
The next page, page 2. Just because when the jury has this, I just want to make sure we're clear. This section, the history section,
Yes, ma'am.
this is based on hearsay. This is what the detectives have told you they believe is the evidence.
The history is going to be based upon the documents that I reviewed from the Westerville Police Department.
Well, I'm curious then, because you must have reviewed the Officer Hollis videotape and or Detective Grubbs' investigative summary that said that John Kramer saw Emily Noble going for a walk on the 25th between 9 and 10 a.m.
I do not recall that.
You don't?
No.
And it's not included, right?
That is correct.
Nor is it included that she was seen at 8 p.m. on the 24th by John Kramer going for a walk. Nor is it included, would you agree, that we know now from the cell phone data that Emily did in fact go for walks and not take her cell phone. That's not included either.
That is correct.
Nor is it included that she's found in different clothing when she is found in the woods than she was wearing the night before on her birthday.
Why are they allowing her to do this? Why isn't the
That is
defense
correct.
Nor
or
is it
the
included
prosecution
that the clothing
objecting?
that she was wearing the night
I'm
of her
not
alleged
sure.
Look at them.
manual strangulation
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
is
four
taken
of
from
them.
the house. The shirt of Mr. Moore and the
Look at
skirt of Emily Noble,
Look
and
at
there's no
Sleeper.
whatsoever. There's no ribs, there's no tears, there's no forensics, but there's no
I
serology.
would be
saliva,
objecting.
nothing.
Wouldn't you just object to
Nothing more.
object just to get her to stop doing that to that guy?
Yeah.
And then I'm just curious.
Stop.
how
Yeah.
accurate-
You try and protect your witness. Yeah.
Yes. It's like they took a dive.
Because it's not a phone charging cord, it's a USB cord.
That is correct.
I think this is a great trial for
Resting,
like,
I assuming by
lost
resting, you mean kneeling,
That is correct.
Yeah.
hmm
but the word resting is used. So then I want to just go to the next page. Page 6. Oh, page, I have this out of order. There we go, page 3. They were just out of order. I want to go through your report page by page. Page 3. You indicate the autopsy and forensic evaluation. Now, obviously, you weren't at the scene, but I'm going to ask anyway. You were also not at the autopsy in this case.
That is correct. I was not.
See, no hands on
So this
anything
section right here,
at any point.
after post-mortem
Correct.
examination, it begins, Miss Noble's remains were transferred to OSU. That's what this paragraph is summarizing right here.
Yes, ma'am.
And, you know, Pardon's name is spelled wrong, but I just mentioned it. So I want to talk here about this paragraph. Showing the witness what's been marked as defendant's exhibit B. But first, we'll leave it here for a second. Perimortem fractures of the left and right greater horns with clean, jagged fracture marks. Do you see that you are reiterating the findings?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, we know you're not an anthropologist, but I'm assuming, do you cut and paste this information into your report? How do you draft it?
Now, I would rely on the information from other experts in using their words to describe what they saw.
So then you're aware, are you? Because I remember when you were being asked about your qualifications, showing you what's defendant's BB. And this is a textbook that was asked about with Dr. Agnew.
You're correct, Digger, but we do provide physics advice
Antemortem, perimortem, and
'Cause I am an
postmortem
expert.
Fractures. This sentence right here says, does it not? Compared to post-mortem fractures, let me move it up so it's sure it's it. Fresh bone fractures are often straighter, whereas
I love my mods.
fractures
I
can
give them
be
shit and make their job so much harder.
You do.
Testify as to the extensive work
You
you've done.
do.
You're not an anthropologist, you know that dry
You guys
bone
are wonderful.
is
I don't tell you
indicative
often
of
enough.
post-mortem. Dry, right? We're in the post-op.
Dry would be postmortem. That is correct.
Dry bones have more jagged appearance. So then going back to the report. So we have your findings with respect to, or the restatement with respect to perimortem, jagged, perimortem, jagged, perimortem. And I noticed that you didn't discuss a lot about the antemortem fractures and displacement of the nasal bones and left maxilla and nasal spine. This again, just so I understand how you draft your report, you just cut that, you take it from one report and you pop it into yours? Is that what
Cut
you
and
No,
paste.
ma'am. What I do is I will read what the other expert has written and may take their language, will paraphrase it, and then put it into the body of my report.
You put it
Huh.
in your report that you rely upon in your findings and conclusions, do you not? That's why they're in your report.
And specifically for this, yes, did I rely upon the report of Dr. Agnew? Yes.
You ever heard the expression garbage in, garbage out?
Yes, ma'am.
And in your reliance,
I love
you
how
use
she's attacking the
photographs of Dr. Agnew
Dr. Agnew.
from her report.
Yeah.
On page 5, do you not?
Yes, ma'am.
They're even, the words are even,
She didn't like that.
Yes, ma'am.
you include on page 6, this picture, right, from Dr. Agnew's report, do you not?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And same, descriptor of the picture, that's straight from her report.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jurors where you see the plastic deformation.
Where I see the displacement in the fracture is in this area here along.
Did you, I know there was a bit of a delay before you started testimony. Did you and Dr. Agnew have a chance to speak outside in the hallway?
No, ma'am.
You did not. So let me pause there. Would you agree that that's the left side?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we were just talking about nasal fractures, but the sides are called the maxillas, or is that right?
The maxilla is the area of the cheekbone. That's the maxilla, and the upper jaw is the maxilla.
The one that Melissa showed?
Oh, she's gonna impeach him on the doctor,
Mhm.
saying he didn't read the
Deformation, which is
report.
Essentially,
Yep.
It's indication of something being like displaced or off kilter.
Brilliant.
Would you agree with me on that?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to just show you what's in your report on 9. And of course, the jurors have this picture so they can tell for themselves. I know you were asked about whether or not there was bruises on her face, but you weren't asked just with respect to whether there's a deviation in the left side of her nose in that picture. And there's another picture, is there not? Thinking, I'm not sure it's in your report.
Is there a question, and will the witness be given the opportunity to answer that question?
Sure.
Right now, we're narrating this report without formulating a question that elicits an answer.
Mrs. Garcia, that's your question.
Back to that displacement with respect to, or rather deviation in the left side of her nose. Would you just agree with me that this side of Emily Noble's face would be her left side
That is correct.
and this side would be her right side? Would you agree with me on that?
Yes, ma'am.
There's your objection because they know it's about to go down and it's not going to be
Mhm.
good.
I'm
Yep.
going to go back to this same
Right.
page here, just so this is additional history. You just note facial injuries. Would you agree that you don't specify the facial injuries?
I'm sorry, you're talking about paragraph 2?
Yeah, where you just
Yes,
start
where I
with
say
the
that-
facial injuries and fractures documented, right?
Yes, meaning documented at autopsy.
Well, there were no.
He
fractures
doesn't
documented
document
in
all
autopsy.
the injuries.
only fractures that you
Right.
And findings and conclusions you
Not-
relied upon were from Dr. Agnew.
Yes,
Right.
the
And
anthropologic
Agnew didn't.
autopsy, not the autopsy, but what Dr. Agnew documented.
And it's those documented fractures that you include and rely on in your report.
That is correct.
I don't know if that means a whole bunch, but it definitely means that they were focused in on one thing
Hmm.
Right.
and not the truth. Not the
Right.
whole thing.
No, she's basically trying to prove that this guy's lazy and just
Right.
exactly what I said. His name is what's important. So
Right.
his name on a paper lends it credibility.
Now,
And these poor jurors have to deal
it's
with
in your
that.
report.
They have to make a quick call.
You
I
have
mean,
35 years of experience in forensic evaluation of injuries and analysis of injury causation and crime scene evaluation. Do you see that in your report on page 11?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's go back to. I'm sure you remember that you gave a YouTube video interview on April 23rd of 2021.
oh, jeez.
Do you remember that? You sat down. It was about a 14-minute interview. Do you remember that?
No, ma'am.
She doesn't even
And
remember
I just want to ask you some questions about, fair to say that you consult with when asked, U.S. attorneys, the FBI, police agencies across the country to assist them in the investigation of violent crimes involving living victims. That an answer you would give in terms of who you consult with?
May I see this one?
Sure.
Sure. Since I don't have a copy of it and don't remember.
And for the record, that's a certified copy.
Yes, ma'am.
Then, and let me know if at any point you need to refresh. Then when you were asked what a police surgeon is, and that's what you are, you're a police surgeon.
Yes, ma'am.
You're a physician trained in forensic medicine to assist detectives in cases involving living victims, living patients. Do you remember saying that?
Living.
Yes, ma'am.
And then
Right.
when you were
Living.
asked questions about, well, do you work on the dead as well as on the living? And tell me if you remember that you said sometimes we do. For example, if we're trying to determine who is the driver, who is the
Car
passenger in a
accident.
motor vehicle collision, where both occupants were ejected, one was clearly driving. Which one?
Damn.
So that
But
is
he
your
was
answers
not
to cases
qualified
for the non-living.
for
Do you
that
No.
remember
at
that?
all.
Yes,
He
ma'am.
just
Not
talked
at all.
those- He lied. He
Not
lied.
a car accident anyway. Right.
That's correct.
Then you were asked about whether, in your experience and knowledge and expertise, who is it in your understanding as to who can determine cause and manner of death? And isn't it true that the person that can determine cause and manner of death, as you said previously, is the medical examiner?
That is one of the physicians that can. That is correct.
And I say what I'm about to say next because so many times the expression crime scene has been used. I am sure that you would agree with me that crime scene is a determination to be made. It is a scene when you arrive.
But it's not a given.
It is a scene when detectives first get there.
That is correct.
And then when you were asked, what if people ask you, who is this Dr. Smock guy? You said, did you not, referring to yourself in the third person, Dr. Smock is a physician
Of course he did.
who has been concerned with justice and has been concerned with living forensics his entire career, training doctors, nurses, police officers, and how to evaluate the living victim who have been the subject of a shooting, a stabbing, or a strangulation. Let me know if you need to refresh it.
Not the
Yes, ma'am.
deceased, the
No.
living.
Hmm.
Right.
And with respect to your passion, it's the application of forensic medicine to the living patient that comes into the emergency department that has just as many forensics needs as someone who is dead, but they are alive. That's also what you said. Let me show. So
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
you were asked about exterior evidence of strangulation, such as hemorrhages, right? That could be bruising. Hemorrhages could be bruising, but there could also be petechial hemorrhages, right? When someone is at a loss of air, they can get like little red dots around their eyes. Can they not?
No, ma'am. The petechial hemorrhage don't come from loss of air. They come from the obstruction of blood.
And the petechial hemorrhages are essentially busted blood vessels. Is that a better way to say that?
Yes, they are broken capillaries that pop from increased pressure.
And those are some visual signs that could exist if you had a case of a living person.
Living or dead, you can see petechial hemorrhage in both.
And I was just going to say, or a dead person where there was tissue still present where we could see those types of things.
That is correct, ma'am.
And we don't have that.
No, ma'am, we do not.
Your hourly rate, what you're being paid, what is it?
I'm being compensated at a rate of $300 per hour.
And then do you have like a per day, per diem when you come here and testify?
It would be a maximum of 10 hours if I'm working 10 hours.
So $3,000.
That would be correct if I work 10 hours.
And I know that you indicated that your work in this case began in January. Is that your testimony of 2021?
Yes, approximately.
And that was when you first had that call with Detective Grubbs, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then in March 9th, you were on a Zoom with a number of people. Is that correct?
I don't recall, but I was on many phone calls, probably Zoom.
You remember, if you don't remember the date, being on a Zoom, how many Zooms have you been on with the prosecutors?
I don't recall any unless the prosecutor's on the one.
And if you don't recall them being on any Zooms with you?
They may have been. I don't recall.
And do you recall how many phone calls you've had?
Huh.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
It's a cross-examination. Go ahead.
No, ma'am, I do not remember how many phone calls. Several.
Did you remember how many in-person meetings?
I don't think we've had any until I came up for this trial.
And then you've had a meeting since you've been here. And I'm not getting into what you discussed. I just want to know the number of times that you've met.
In person, yesterday.
And how many calls have you had with Mark Hickman, the Delaware County coroner?
I have not. I had one meeting with him yesterday.
You met in person with him.
That is correct.
And how many meetings or calls have you had with Dr. Agnew?
None.
And how many meetings or calls have you had with defense expert Heather Garvin?
None.
How many meetings or calls have you had with the Montgomery County Coroner's Office, who was the entity that did the autopsy in this case?
None.
The photos, I noticed in the case history included in your report, I'll show you page 3 again. You're aware, I presume, that there was a water bottle found on the left-hand side of Emily when she was found.
Yes, ma'am.
You're aware that there was a vape pen on the left-hand side of Emily as well. I presume you're aware of that.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm sure you're aware that she was
Matt, do you remember if this is the state's last
I don't recall which
witness,
time she was.
or do they have
And
one
you see
after
the
this?
position, that she's in that
Yes, ma'am, I do.
and she's kneeling,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't remember.
showing you what's been marked as and
Okay, I can look. I was just wondering if you knew.
I don't remember.
are. This is one of the pictures that you looked at, was it not?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
And you were asked about knots on that cord. and you
They
looked at
did.
pictures or not.
They didn't release. They usually don't
Have it
show those
correct. Let's
pictures.
look at it.
Can you zoom in?
Sure. I'm also, can I have the shoes? Can I have the shoes? I'd like to show you the shoes, if you don't mind.
Because this did not go the way that they anticipated or wanted it to. You can tell by the reaction. So
They just steamroller people usually.
You do.
There's no way
Yeah.
a normal
I would like one, and that'll do.
like
Thank you.
a prosecutor. What do they
There's
call
a
it?
right and a left,
I can't
and
think.
I'm okay with you opening it.
A
so
lawyer
it's your
that you
choice.
get from the state,
Tell me if there's a pair of
right?
scissors back there, if there's not.
You're not going to get
Public
this kind
defender.
of learning from those people.
right.
And I know the detectives in the courtroom with
So
respect
they
to chain of
just
custody.
they just
you didn't-
steamroller people. They're just
I know.
they're not used to it.
Would you like me to open it?
Yes, please, but you can tell the jurors if you're opening the right or the left.
But they don't care. He doesn't
They are
care.
not marked. Do you want me to?
Yeah, he's opening.
Not
that.
really.
That's fine, okay.
What's going to happen to
Okay,
him? Nothing.
And I know that Your Honor.
Nothing.
They will be marking
No
the pictures
accountability.
in the corner.
No, they just keep. I mean, his ego got hit a little bit, but
Can
you know,
indicate
whatever.
whether that's
Yeah.
the right or left.
Yes, ma'am. This is the left in the sheet.
Bruh, seriously? With the bags, man.
Every single trial, the bags.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So just want to, if you could, would you agree with me as we're looking at it, that do you see the knot of how those shoes are tied?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm sure you're aware that the shoes were still found on the feet of the remains.
That is correct.
And so with respect to, I'll take a expression with respect to a slow walk, but certainly the jury will have this. And this would have been the left shoe that was found on Emily Noble based on your review of the photographs. and the evidence label.
Based on the evidence label.
Thank you. No need to open the other one, just wanted it. And I know I want to talk to you about the positioning. This is R, Defendant's Exhibit R, which is previously marked. This is one of the photographs you reviewed, is it not?
It is.
And that appears to be the right companion shoe of the one that we just looked at.
That is correct, ma'am.
And the legs right here, just based from your observations.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're aware, with respect to the coroner's report, are you not, that she was found wearing a black tank top?
Yes, ma'am.
And the remains were only, was it about 18 pounds when they were found? Do I remember that number right?
Yes, somewhere less than 20, I believe.
Less than 20 pounds. So over the course of decomposition, Emily's body went from 95, 98 pounds all the way down to less than 20.
That is correct.
And I don't mean to say this as a word that is disrespectful, but it was almost like she shrinks almost, right? Like her body size decreases that much because she loses the fluids, the muscle, the tissue, all that kind of thing.
Actually, the better word is you collapse.
And so you're aware that there was a tank top recovered, a set of leggings, and then there's also like a white t-shirt that has fallen down and off her body. Do you remember that from the items collected at the coroner's office?
I do not.
Okay.
But there's probably a list of all the items.
All the items are listed in the report, which they recovered, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And we see that the legs are covered here. They appear to be pants.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I know with respect to your findings about staging, I just want to be clear that when someone is dead, there is an expression, is there not, dead weight?
Yes, ma'am.
Because if I'm dead and it's my hands, right? If you move hands, let's just say 3 hours, right? After I'm actually declared, and this is hypothetical, but actually I've been declared dead, and you got dead weight, right? So it's harder to move someone because someone's body, right, can't move on its own. Would you agree with me?
That is correct.
And so I just want to talk about the positioning of the body. That first of all, if a body was dead, that they would first have to be positioned in the kneeling position, right? And they would have to be held up. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then we've got their hands, and then we would have to like somehow put them back here. And then as you see in Defendant's Exhibit R, it appears, does it not, that the right hand is around the ankle.
Yes, ma'am.
Nothing further.
You got this.
One moment, please.
Take your time.
Looks like we have 3. Let's see.
Three witnesses left.
I'm looking. Give me a second.
Again, you've reviewed, defense counsel was asking about whether or not you've reviewed their own expert's report.
That is correct.
And their own expert agrees the fractures to the neck area are perimortem.
That is correct.
I can't
Now, you were
entirely
asked
tell.
about previous testimony, the Brandon.
But it looks like we have 3, and then
Excuse me, trial 2 years ago now.
Yes, ma'am.
And specifically, defense counsel was asking you about your testimony regarding.
then we go over to this
injuries
the
that you
defense
see on the
case.
and injuries that you see on the suspect. Do you recall that kind of testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
And those injuries you were describing in Brandon Ivy were from which viewpoint between the strangler and the victim?
I believe they were face to face.
Face to face? And so if you are seeing wounds on a victim like you testified to, scrape marks.
Yeah, so we have
like
3
this,
more for the state, and
or
then
scratches,
the defense only has, it appears, 3. So,
can someone come behind you and manually strangle you?
Yes, ma'am.
Almost there.
yep.
What if you're punched in the face before you're strangled? Would that impact your ability to fight back?
Yes, ma'am.
If someone came from behind you to manually strangle you, would you expect to see those wounds on a suspect?
No, ma'am.
Now,
Of
to
this
talk
stream?
about the literature again. 10 minutes? Thanks.
And I think
counsel was
a lot of
saying
people
your testimony is that
forget
nowhere in the world are there 4 fractures, and that was
what
not
they're
your testimony.
struggling to do right now
And so, in
is
your
just
review
prove that she was murdered.
of the literature,
Mhm.
what
Right.
literature?
Not that it
Oh,
was me.
shit. Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're spending a lot of time on just trying to struggle to convince the jury that she was even murdered.
Right.
On top
Right.
of it, with no evidence, none, zero, they're going to say it was that I did it. Which is, I'm not saying she was. I'm just saying that's how weak their case was.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, we had I'm Not Obama joined this week for the first time, and ex-comer apparently didn't know. So the gentleman joining us, so it's myself and Dog Mama, and the other gentleman joining us is the individual. There he is, Matheau Moore, and he is the individual that was on trial for this murder. So he's been incredibly gracious with his time. He's been joining us and explaining some of the different shit that's happened. And he's been great. So
Thank you.
yes, it is
Anybody
a
has-
spoiler.
Yeah, here I am. Not as free as I want to be, but freer than I was when I was going through this. I'll tell you that.
Exactly.
I wrote a book. It's called A Staged Suicide in Ohio. Emily, A Staged Suicide in Ohio. If you want to get into it. If anybody has any questions at all as they're going through this, they might say, hey, that's something weird. I want to know about that. Reach out. I have a YouTube station, Matheau. That's Matheau Moore, Moore. I don't really know how to link things too well, but if you just look for me, you'll find
Digger's
me.
got it.
Oh, okay.
And I answer any questions anybody's got. I'll answer for whatever.
Yeah, he's been fantastic with his time and fantastic with it. There hasn't been a question that he shied away from. So it's admirable, and I've appreciated every damn second of it because it's been awesome. So
Yeah.
If you're a law student or if you're just evaluating this trial, and this goes on everywhere. It really does. I just got lucky. I had money for this really super great lawyer, and they didn't have a case. So, but that doesn't mean that people don't get convicted all the time. They do. They don't have access to good counsel. It's sad.
Yeah.
It's scary. So it's really scary. And it's scary that law enforcement and prosecutors will do this, knowingly do this to try to keep the whole thing going. It's in my book. I watched Mighty Me. I watched your critique on the news the other day. You think a lot like me, man. We're right on the same lines.
Yeah.
You see it. I'm sure most of your people that are subscribing to your channel, they get it. But this is a real good example of it. This is it. It's not fucking playing around. This really happens. Yeah, so it's a real interesting thing.
So we got a couple questions. Are you regrowing the amazing beard from the interrogation or from court?
I tried to. It just wasn't happening. It's like a year thing. It's like this big long. Whatever. It's too much.
Yeah, it takes time. So for sure. Here's a couple of his links: his Facebook, his Cash App, his YouTube, and to get his book on Amazon. So the book has a lot of things in it that we haven't covered. I suggest reading it. It's not terribly long to read, a couple 120 pages or something like that.
180. It's not that long.
Yeah.
I read it in like a day, like all day.
Yeah. You can burn through it pretty quick, and then by next Monday, if you have any questions. So
if you notice, I have a Facebook page with all that. That's all I can figure out is Facebook and YouTube. It's the only thing I can figure out it. But all my information's on Facebook, and it's all on YouTube. So.
Yeah. And if you don't have Facebook or can't get a hold of them for whatever reason, reach out to me, and I can certainly ask them either next week or ask them in private or whatever. So
and every Saturday, in the morning, I critique the trial with this guy from England. The name of his station is titled the Alternate Corner.
The Alternate Corner.
Alternate Corner, and we do what we're doing here. We review my trial.
Yeah, and
We had
Mighty was
Mead
on last week.
It was fan, and I'll figure out the glitches. You're yeah, you don't want to go to Westerville, dude.
No.
Don't ever go there. They're looking for you. Yeah, some good clips.
What is it like watching your own trial, Matt?
Whatever. It's no big deal. I mean, it was horrible. Everything before the trial was like psychedelic. It was so weird and strange, and I'd never been involved with police. I'd never been under that type of pressure. I'm kind of a hippie, laid back. And all of a sudden I was put into this thing where I didn't know what was real and what wasn't real. These people lie. I didn't know that the government was this corrupt. I mean, this stuff, I mean, you kind of do, but you don't until you're faced with it. And then, and then when I got to trial, there was a lot of pressure because I didn't know I was going to be found guilty or not guilty. But all of a sudden, the truth was all of a sudden there for me to see. You know, I started, and then when he said not guilty, everything my whole world just changed. It was crazy. It was just amazing, like this adrenaline rush. And then I got out. I mean, I left. It cost me everything. I mean, I'm still high to this day. I mean, if I look at what they've done to me financially, I mean, they destroyed me. I mean, I was retired at 49. I was just going to do this thing where I was just going to coast along. But money wasn't. It was the first time in my life money wasn't an issue ever. It was just oh, thank God that's all gone. And literally, they took it all from me. And I should be mad, but I'm not. I should be. I'm still real happy that that I got found not guilty. But yeah, it's a thing that you got to come. I mean, I would have given more if I had it to give me, to give me the defense I got. I really don't know. Mighty Meat might know more about it, but I don't think everybody gets a good defense.
No,
they don't.
I mean, they come in there
Not
with
usually.
this guy. They took an hour and a half to get through this guy's credentials, and it's all nonsense. Go to his website. It's bullshit. He's not what he's saying he is, and it took an attorney like Diane's caliber to get up there and show everybody that. I really don't think it happens. I think there's a ton of innocent people in jail, and I think these prosecutors and these cops are in for themselves. They don't care. They really don't care. Yeah, they're bad people. They're bad to do this to innocent people. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. I don't know how they sleep at night, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, because there's no consequence for it. They get so caught up in trying to win, like that's all that matters. And
they buy into the system and they figure, hey, collateral damage, right? It's collateral damage. It's innocent people here or there, but mostly we're doing good. No, you're not. You care about. Grubbs cares about himself. That's it. Yeah, he's been trained not to care about people. He just cares
advancing
about
his career.
Yep, that's it. He and you know what? He'll probably be police chief someday in Westerville. They'll spin it. They'll fucking spin it. They're good at this. But thanks for having me on, though, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, brother. How did Matthew find Mighty? Actually, or how did Mighty? I don't know which way you're putting that because
how did Matthew find Mighty Meat?
How did we find each other?
He popped into my chat one night, and I was like, "What the?" And when we like the first or second week we started the trial, so he started watching the trial, and I'm like, I'm like, there's no way in hell this guy's gonna even respond to me. I'm still a smaller channel, like I'm kind of an asshole at times.
Dude, you're funny as shit. I hope you take off, man. I love your news thing. It's fucking hilarious, dude. You're fucking great.
So I reached out to him and I was like, oh hell, we'll give it a shot. And he's been awesome. So I appreciate the hell out of it. But
any of your people have any questions or whatever? I mean, yeah.
I'm working my way through.
If you think you can crack the case, be like, I got you, Mr. Moore. I can prove that you're guilty. Okay, that's what I'm here for. That's what I want.
And the trial affected. That's exactly the excerpt of the book or the description of the book. Yes. So
they coined it. I don't know what I'm doing. I know a lot of people are like, dude, that's what they were accusing you of. How could you name your book that? And I was like, that's what everybody sees it. Not
The
like, I'm
media.
not admitting anything. I'm just, that's what they
Yeah.
coined it. So I just
Right.
named the book what they said, what everybody recognizes it as. Like I hashtag staged suicide in Ohio. That's not me saying that I staged suicide in Ohio.
Right.
It just means I'm trying
Right.
to figure out this fucking stupid internet bullshit. I don't know.
Right. So I got sidetracked again. We have like 10 minutes left in the trial, and I didn't realize that, but I stopped
Keep
it
going.
because I saw an interesting chat. So I'll pull you back down, and we'll finish up, and then we got a couple more questions. But
important to evaluating the fractures in Emily Noble's neck, not the specific titles, but in generally.
When you review what other physicians have encountered and written about when they write it up, you need to make sure that what you are looking at in the literature is what you are looking at a scene or in a case. And the issue is, yes, there are fractures of 4 bones in people that are 242 pounds. The question is, looking at the literature, are there any fractures ever reported in somebody who is less than 100 pounds? No. In a kneeling position in an incomplete, no, it is not there. Lots of cases out there of manual strangulation, but you have to look at the literature. So you look at things like weight, and there is an article that addresses that specific point of hundreds of cases in this one case. Were there any with, actually, let me look at it. I can tell you exactly, because this is,
Go ahead. We'll do the other question.
Just ask a question.
Dr. Smythe, let me ask you a question. So from your review of the literature, what's important in evaluating Emily Noble's death is her position,
her position, absolutely,
what kind of hanging it was,
absolutely,
and what kind of weight.
that is correct, her body weight,
And quite frankly, you don't care about a 200-pound male that's fully suspended in a hanging.
absolutely not.
You care about what has occurred in the medical literature with females under 110 pounds.
It is still redirect.
How many females were there under 100 pounds? How many?
right.
Wait
What do you
until
care most about when you
Diane
review
gets
the
old.
literature
Dude.
in Emily Noble's case?
I look at literature related to the issues of any particular case, in particular Emily's. I look at the weight. I look at the type of hanging. I look at the nature of the ligature. I look at the nature of the injuries, the fractures to her neck. All those are critical to make sure that when you look at an article, is it relevant to your particular case? Some are and some aren't.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Briefly, Your Honor, if I may, Mark.
Redirect.
You said you look at the type of hanging it was. Just so I'm clear, a ligature around a neck that is originally 98 pounds, when the body collapses, as you say, to be less than 20, things change, do they not?
Oh, yes, the body dries out, absolutely.
And so when you say that one of the things is you look at how the hanging was, you have no idea how this ligature around the neck was changed or moved in any way over the time while it was around her neck while she was in the woods,
What I have is the information that was found when she was found.
which doesn't include a picture up in this direction.
Not that I recall.
I just want to be clear about this, close the loop if I can, that the article I showed you, Defendant's Exhibit II, is an article that is addressing age, and the weights of those and the ages are not at issue in this article.
They seem to be
And
going
this
back
is
and
the
forth
number
to as many as
indicated
they
by the
would like,
literature that had the full
honestly.
fractures.
And then the jury
There doesn't
question.
Number of
seem-
fractures.
I do see
Yeah.
a number of fractures.
And then the jury gets to
And you
ask
know that Emily
questions
Noble was 52 years
as
of age.
well.
And then they get to,
Nothing
then
further.
the lawyers get to ask questions again.
Questions you may have, please, witness. Will you write them down now? We'll take them.
So you get to redirect the jury.
Right.
Don't think there's much time here. Yeah, there is. Ohio sucks.
Sir, I have a few questions for you, and they're going to bounce around a little bit, so there probably won't be real consistency.
I like questions.
I do like this jury question thing, though.
Hmm.
Could fractures occur in the neck?
They bring
when
up
the
stuff
injured
that most
subject
people
is
wouldn't, lawyers wouldn't.
Even in
Yeah.
the medical literature, there are no fractures in women under the age of 10, complete or incomplete. They're not, they don't happen because there isn't enough weight to create those injuries.
That's not true. That's not true.
No.
Those bones are proportional and proportional to her. It doesn't matter. Not everybody's bones are the same size and strength, so a heavier person would break your bones. No, Not
Right.
at all.
No, it
That
does not.
doesn't make any
Brain-
sense at all.
It doesn't, the presence or absence of alcohol, no, the time to unconsciousness and brain death is the same based upon our limited studies. Nobody volunteers for those studies.
My
Oh.
expert explains why that's not right.
No one
Yes, you
volunteers.
can get what's called rigor mortis. Where your muscles
wonder
contract. So yes, and rigor
So you
mortis
just
can come,
fucked your own
and then the brain
credibility.
disappear. But yes, you can
Mhm.
get contraction.
Limited study.
And if you're holding something, and I guess the same circumstance. If you're holding something, will you grab it tightly or will it be released?
Once you go unconscious, then your muscles are going to relax. That's what it means to be unconscious. And then when you're dead, they're completely relaxed. And then the rigor mortis can come post-mortem.
Now, during cross-examination, defense asks you if you visited the scene when the body was recovered in September 21 and during the follow-up visit in March 2022. Do your answers, do the same answers apply to September 2020 and March 2020?
Meaning, did I visit the scene on either of those?
Yeah, do your answers, you use dates. Let me read the question. Defense asks the witness if you visited the scene when the body was recovered September 2021 and during the follow-up visit of March 2022. Do your answers remain the same to apply to September 2020 and March 2021? Means changing the dates.
Yeah, I did not go to the scene on any of those dates.
And so your testimony regarding the timeframes remain the same,
Yes.
at least to that extent. Okay. How did you determine the time of death was after 4:18 p.m.?
She is alive on the day before when that picture was taken. And clearly, she is alive. So that's the last time, at least photographically documented, where she is seen alive. So it had to occur after that time.
Okay. And your finding of fractures of the nasal area, would that result in bleeding?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Excuse me. It could. When you think about if anyone's ever been punched in the nose or anybody's been punched in the nose, a lot of blood vessels. So yes, could it result in nasal bleeding? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Where's all the blood?
Right.
Where's all the blood at the
That's all
scene?
the questions.
All over her clothes, all over my clothes. If I punch her in the face and all this blood occurred.
Sir, you are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we heard earlier, there may not be absolutes in life, but I will tell you, we're absolutely done today. So we're going to take our evening recess. As always.
Okay, so we are done with day 5. All complete with day 5.
I think that's it for the that would be it for the prosecution, I think. 6 is 6 and 7 is me.
Oh, okay.
And then 8's the 7 ends with it going to jury, and then 8's the verdict.
Gotcha.
So I think he was the last guy.
I had a couple questions from how did you find your legal team? Now I know you've said this one a couple times, it's in your book, so I can make her defer if you want, but I think it's an interesting story. So
It is. It's I had a high school friend whose older brother, was convicted of a murder, 86, 87. That's how old I am. He was acquitted after doing 19 years. It was a big deal in my hometown of Utica, New York. I was friends with his brother. I think he was a grade older than me. It could have been the same grade, I'm not sure. While Emily's investigation was going on, while I'm out, and I had a civil attorney. It's just this guy who was around, who was a friend of a friend. And when let me go back. When I the guy that got convicted of murder and he got exonerated through DNA. He was one of the first to get exonerated with DNA. He knows Barry Scheck, he started the Innocence Project. So it was a big thing in my town. So I called his brother. I told him what was going on, and his brother was like a big part of why he got his brother out in a lot of ways. He did a lot of work. He said his brother. He's like, hey, there's a private investigator right in Columbus that's really good, and he doesn't like cops, and he gets it. So get a hold of him. I got a hold of him. Hired him. He came over to my house. You got it. Hired him on the spot, and he said, hey, listen, you're gonna need a proper attorney. The one you got's not the kind you need. I'm like, okay, you know. And he told me, he gave me a recommendation. This guy's name was Court Gatterdam. He's my primary attorney. Through Court Gatterdam, he knows Diane. He knew Diane somehow. I think they did some other cases together. They all know each other. All those lawyers know each other.
Yeah.
But
Of course.
these high-priced defense attorneys, they all know each other. So it's just like this thing, this version of events. This it just all kind of fell into place. Didn't have anything to do with me. It was just a recommendation from somebody. And all of a sudden, I didn't hire her until after I was arrested. That you gotta know how that all works. I mean, they're all defense attorneys. They're not as they're their own thing. You're dealing with something that's entirely on its own. Defense attorneys are. She did a great job. She really did. She saved my life. But there's a lot to defense attorneys. They're in on it as much as anybody else, kind of, sort of. It's just this system thing, you know. It's just part of it. It's just she just happens to be on my side of things, on a defendant's side of things. But it's a lot of money. She was an incredible amount of money. I mean, I would have gave her more. I didn't care. I just gave it to her. But a version of events that I can't really, other than to just tell you that things just happened perfectly, and all of a sudden she was there.
Just fell into place. Yeah. Sometimes that's the way it
there's
happens.
some stuff in my book that I read about that I don't kiss her ass. There was a lot of things that she did that weren't nice. She didn't have a real good bedside manner. She was very focused on what she had to do, and her focus wasn't on me being okay in jail, going crazy, going, oh my God, am I going to make it through this or what? She didn't
right.
matter. So they live in this weird world. You know, it's like, who knows what they think about. Who knows? It's not making people feel comfortable about the situation they're in. I'll tell you that. It's very difficult.
They think they have a job to do, and that's their job is to get you away from the charges or as little jail time as possible. So
they're not like us. They're not like, hey, everything's fine. Don't worry. I'm really looking. None of that. They're just like, you know what? Deal with it. You're in fucking jail. Deal with it. She did call me a ideal inmate on a podcast that she was on recently. She's like, considering what that dude was going with the pressure he was under, it was kind of surprising that he was an ideal inmate. I didn't cause any trouble in jail. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so charges like that, why continue to be, on the up and up? Like, go
because I was innocent. So I was just like, you know what, we're gonna.
Yeah.
I mean, if things went bad, if I got convicted, it would have been a different thing. I would have turned into a wild man. But I mean, up until that point, I wasn't gonna fuck around.
Right. Still hope that it was all gonna get resolved at some point.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you're innocent. What are you gonna do? You know what I mean? I
Right.
guess if you're guilty, you probably start going. I don't know what you do, but I mean, I was innocent, so I just behaved myself.
Yeah.
I didn't really know.
Kept your head down. Yeah. Yeah. So
jail is different in prison. There's nobody in jail wants any trouble, really. It's different in prison.
Yeah.
Prison's prison. But there was some. You know what you got to do in situations like that is be faster than the slowest dude. Right? You know what I mean? As long as you're not the weakest guy around, they're not gonna.
Yeah.
They'll have someone else to fuck with besides you. So you just got to make sure you're like mid-level guy. You're all right.
That's good advice. I've never been to jail, thankfully, and I don't ever want to. Like,
fucking horrible.
I've been to jails. I've been to Wayne County Jail. It looks like a fucking nightmare. But
imagine being in there for my teeth moved. My jawline is different now because there's no vitamins in there. You're literally eating canned food every day. I mean, it's awful for health wise.
That's crazy.
You hear things. You hear people screaming. If you read my book, I don't know if I was delusional or not, but I saw things that were not of this world. I don't know if it was the pressure or what it was, but I saw crazy things. You have to read the book, but it's not any fun being in that situation. It's like beyond pressure. And your mind starts going. You don't know. You get on that phone, the thing I was talking to my stepmother, who I adore. She's younger than my dad by like I think 15 years. So she's a younger lady, but now she's like, you know, she's like in her 60s. I think she just turned 60. I've known her my whole life. I met her when I was like 10. So I've known her my whole life. And I'm on the phone with her. My dad dies. My mother is already dead. So she kind of took over a mother role, and my stepfather took over my dad role a little bit. And here I am talking to my stepmother on the phone who I've known all this time. And literally on the phone, she changed into a person that I didn't even know who it was by the end of the phone call. I'd forgotten who I was talking to. Because she would say things, and her voice would just, it was crazy. I'm like, who are you? Who is this? I mean, and I'm like, do I trust you or don't I trust you? It's just crazy. You go insane. You really do. You really
especially at that point
go
with
bonkers.
Right. Everybody's after you and everybody's trying to fuck you over. I can see why you.
It's the world.
You know.
It gets. Now that I'm out, I'm literally like, I'm compensating. I'm just so free. I'll do what I say, what I want. I do what I want. It's because I just do what's true. Just keep it true. Keep it real. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm not afraid of anything. You know, I'm not afraid. That's why when I watched your news program the other day, it's all fun to me. All that crazy shit. Yeah. It's like it's just fun, right? Who's gonna take any of that seriously?
Right. So
it's happening. Don't get me wrong, and I appreciate guys like you keeping me informed because I can't watch the news anymore. It's nice to be able to, hey, I know this dude. I trust this guy. He's gonna interpret the news for me in a super funny way. So
yeah, and I try to make it bite-sized and reasonable for people. Like it's not.
Dude, you put on Biden.
The world sucks, man.
Biden was fucking talking. I didn't know he was that far gone. Dude. I didn't know.
He is.
You know, you're like, yeah, like you see this all the time. You're like, yeah, here goes Biden. He just starts talking. This guy's the president, and they're gonna vote him in again. I mean, this is crazy, right? This is
God, I hope not, but yeah. So we had a couple more, and then I'll let you get out of here. I'm sure you wanna. Oh yeah, Mighty's from Michigan. I can trash Ohio all I want here. Exactly.
Right.
I'm born and raised in
Michigan. We had a pleasant weekend, didn't we?
Gross. Did you know Cleveland? Did you know Cleveland has the only river that catches fire? Detroit better than Cleveland. Detroit is better than Cleveland. But anyways, back to what is the tattoo on Matthew's wrist? I saw that on your hand there.
My Joe died. My second son killed himself, so I tattooed his name. That's his full name, Joseph John Peterson Moore.
Oh, okay. Well, there's your answer.
Someone said it was at trial. I was at trial. I didn't know this was going on, but this is the way people are with this crazy shit. Who's the guy that killed his wife? His name was Peterson. I forget. I don't really.
Scott
Peterson.
She's
like. That's not a good move for him to tattoo that guy's name on his wrist at a trial. It's just like, yeah.
Oh shit!
I tattooed Scott Peterson's name on my wrist.
Oh well.
Wow.
That's crazy.
No, it's my son or my son Joey's. He committed suicide. 10 months before Emily did, or 10 or 11 months. And it had a lot to do with it. They don't go into it in the trial, but if you want to know what really happened, read the book. Get the book. I tell you what happened.
Yeah,
it was a lot.
It's in there.
And child dies. She took great responsibility on when she became Joey's stepmother. It's the death of a child is something you just can't imagine. Really, I couldn't. I have two little guys, and I could never like. I'd be fucking devastated, so I get it. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's gonna probably be it for tonight. We'll start on day 6 next Monday. So Matt, as always, I appreciate you stopping by, buddy, and hanging out with us. And we're gonna see you Saturday.
Yeah, I'll stop by Saturday for sure.
Cool. All right.
So. All right, buddy. I'll see you Saturday.
Later.
Yeah.
Take care, man. So that was Matt. Coming up, so tomorrow we'll do tensions. Thursday we'll be back to the news. Friday, I don't know. I haven't decided on Fridays yet. We'll see what happens. And then what the hell do I do on Saturday? Oh, Science Saturday. We'll we'll continue up.
That's Sunday.
We'll continue on the Apollo moon landings. Comer, I did look at that those moon pictures. The reality is I'm going to need to do a little bit more looking into it because there's conflicting reports. Surprise! So I'll do a video on it either. Well, I'll put it up tomorrow. So I'll do one. I'll do some more research tonight and put a video up either mid or late day tomorrow, depending on when I get to it. So, but yeah, so that's what I got coming up, and I think Sunday we'll go more of the history of Detroit. We'll go from 1788 to 1860. And yeah, so that's kind of what we got coming up for the rest of the week. No, I hadn't seen it, but I'm very intrigued at this point. So better stream again sooner. I'm unsubscribing. I stream every night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time.
Just not on Wednesday. Well, he sometimes does on Wednesdays too.
I'll probably do it on Wednesday because there's a bunch of shit that I want to get to and not an extra day to get to it. So it's highly likely on Wednesday I'll stream. But yeah, so thank you, Dog Mama, for joining me.
No
It's
problem.
always appreciated. And till next week on the Moore trial, we'll see you guys later. Have a
Later.
good night, everybody.